Aha.
Welcome to my kitchen. It's been a while, but if you recall the process of making the ancient temple incense, Kyphi, that you saw back in May and back in June, I started a new batch actually on Samhain, so the 31st of October. And the only difference is I was not live streaming every single step of the way because I don't know if you know, but October and November, especially the early part of November, are super busy for me. So I was trying to like sneak in like kefi making every day to get the ingredients in on time in between filming with Portals to Hell, filming with some other fun travel channel stuff. Writing things, dealing with patrons, having other live streams, and just generally uh, doing more stuff than doing stuff, doing all the things. Anyway, so a lot of the process has happened in secret, but we are at the point of boiling the kefi down. What, I'm sure you're going to ask, the fuck is kefi? It is an ancient temple incense made a very different way from what we're accustomed to with like loose resin incenses or incense sticks or incense cones. It has a base of fruit, wine, and honey, and then a variety of precious resins, ground woods, and a number of roots and things like lemongrass. So it's a whole bunch of different stuff. So let me see, lemongrass and Egyptian mint and galangal. And in this case, this one has a fair amount of cinnamon and sandalwood, a little bit of aloes wood, which is incredibly precious incense wood. And the theme, every one of my kefi batches is a unique batch all by itself. And the theme for this one is Phoenix. My goal for this one and the intention set along each step of the way was rising from the ashes. Before I start talking too much, I'm going to turn the low heat on. Uh, and the heat has to be very, very low. This batch, I'm expecting to boil down pretty quickly, so I'm going to have to watch it fairly carefully as we go. I also want to do a shout out to Mama Mason, Kat Mason Rogers' mom, who made these lovely tools of olive wood for me that are comfortable for my hands and tough enough to stand up to this very long process, because this stuff is going to turn into like double boil and trouble level of like just trying to make it move. Did we open that window?
No, we didn't, but we will in just a second.
We should, because I'm already warm. Oh, I usually recall what book something came from, and the thing is I heard about the myth of the phoenix so young that I don't actually remember if it was a book, if it was my mom reading it out of a book. But what stuck with me was this story of the phoenix as a migratory bird, and it was sometimes also called the Banu bird. And so the phoenix would return every 500 years to Egypt and build what looked like a nest out of cinnamon branches and frankincense branches and like all of this precious incense. And instead of a nest, it was a funeral pyre. So every 500 years, it would come back and it would burn itself to death on a pyre of cinnamon branches, only it would be renewed and reborn for another part of its life cycle. And that idea of this both a nest wherein you associate a bird's nest with eggs and children and fertility and rebirth, and then it's also a funeral pyre. So it's this great 500-year cycle, the end of a cycle, and at the end of that, through this conflagration, the bird comes out brilliant and renewed. And that has stuck with me since I was a teeny tiny little person fascinated by myths and stories. Subsequently, whenever I give something the term phoenix, when it comes to incenses, they tend to be heavy on the cinnamon. Now, this one is true cinnamon, as opposed, there's a whole bunch of different types of cinnamon. They are all from, the same related trees, but depending on where you get it from and what part of the tree you're harvesting, some of them will have a much more, the true cinnamon has like that sweet cinnamon red hot scent and flavor to it. And then cassia and some other ones are a little bit more like what you're probably familiar with from like grandma's banana bread or spice bread, where like, grandma's kitchen has like this, it's more of a warm, kind of a softer cinnamon.
And people are very curious about the overall smell.
Well, right now, so the step that you didn't get to see that happened is right before we get down to the boil. There are a couple of ingredients that you put in at the very end over this, several day process. And, this is like the 11th. So, it started on the 31st and it's been an ingredient each day, with the exception of a day where I had to travel, actually 2 days where I had to travel. So I doubled up to account for having to like sleep over somewhere else. And today, earlier, I was boiling down frankincense in honey. So you have to go on really, really low heat in a special copper pot that is normally used for candy making, sugar, meringues, things like that. And like when I say low heat, it was like one and just a titch over. This is a gas stove. The frankincense melts in the honey. You need to make sure you do not get any of that on yourself because it sticks like napalm and it is hot. So frankincense melted into honey, and that went in here and got stirred up. 2 cups of honey, and in this case, a cup and a fourth of frankincense. And I split that up between Boswellia serrata and a variety of frankincense that I got from a company called Wild Tree Essentials called Mahogany Gold. And it's like this rich brown with occasionally like white tears that are more familiar for what people expect with frankincense. And it's got a sweeter, almost more syrupy scent to it.
There have been a couple of questions about the copper pot. So why copper?
Well, so when I started making kefi, this was a research project before it was a craft project. And the recipe is thousands of years old. The recipe that I'm using is a little over 2,000 because it appears on the walls of the Temple of Edfu in Egypt. And I use that one in particular because it specifically has the proportions. So it doesn't just list the ingredients, it tells you how many, and this much frankincense versus this much honey, this much dried fruit. And everything must be boiled in a copper pot. In doing the research, that was the one thing that I found over and over and over again. Copper, as we know, is reactive, and it's one of the reasons why you don't cook normal foods in it, certainly not anything that's acidic. There are a few foods where you want to cook the food, or you're encouraged to cook the food in an unlined copper pot. An unlined copper pot does interesting things for sugar-based desserts. So when you're boiling down sugar, when you're making meringues, it makes the meringues like fluffier and firmer. And this is also used as a risotto pot. So like a long, slow process of boiling and getting the rice down to like that like soft, creamy consistency. And trying to find an unlined copper pot is not an easy prospect. This one was handmade in Italy and is in fact a risotto pot. That one is by Moviel, which is a French company, and it is a sugar hard candy pot. Now, I've tried kefi on the cheap to just sort of see like if I just had a steel pot, what difference does it make? And it does change the way it changes the way things mix up, and it changes the way they firm up. And I have to say that the cheaper kind of down and dirty version of kefi did not have the same enriched, nuanced layer of smell. So this stuff, there's frankincense and there's myrrh, there's gum mastic, there's cinnamon, and in this particular batch, sandalwood, aloes wood. In most general kefi, there's also, and this one has aspalathos, which we might also know as honeybush, lemongrass, which is known in the recipe as camel grass, but it's the same thing. There's something called cyperus root, which some translators interpret as galangal. In either case, these are a rhizome that has a strong scent. Galangal is a little bit like ginger. So think of something that's got a flavor and a scent profile that is a mix between ginger and cinnamon, and you've got galangal. It's fiery and warm. I used galangal in this one instead of cypress grass roots because of that phoenix, and I knew it was going to be very heavy on cinnamon. Anyway, so let me stir this a bit.
Yeah, folks wish we had smell-o-vision. And there are many hellos from around the world.
Hello to everyone. I hope everyone's doing well as we continue through the COVID times. Stand up a little bit so I can get a good look at this. If you hear a grinding sound, that is Illyria finishing up the myrrh. Typically in perfumery, and not so much incense making, the order of the ingredients is very important to the overall scent, especially toward the end. And one of the truisms there is the scents that you add last are the scents that come out first in the finished product. Interestingly, the way in which kefi is made, that seems to also have an effect. Like this is something it's made over multiple days. Wine is a part of it. You're making this mash that like sits, and while it's not like overtly fermenting, it's definitely doing something. And you're building each step of the scent profile every single day with each new addition. It's interesting to smell the way it changes with each addition every day. The first day it begins with a mash of, in this case, Turkish figs, Smyrna figs, and red wine. And the original recipe calls for either raisins or dates. There are related types of incense that use figs, so I feel safe using figs with this. And I have found that dates result in a very tarry incense. It's very, very thick and very syrupy, and it takes a very long time to cure, and it remains very, very sticky. Now, the benefit with dates at the base is there's this very super sweet syrupy undernote that it maintains. Raisins and figs are a little, I guess, drier, both in consistency but also in scent. Although kefi is known for like that, there's a sweet quality to the scent. With figs and raisins, it's not quite so like heavy molasses on the air as you get with dates. In this one, I used exactly 4 dates, 4 medieval dates, along with the figs. I also have a whole section of my webpage at this point devoted to kefi with all of the recipes of the previous batches that I've done, which each of them is so unique. I end up calling them vintages in the same way that like when you are making mead or wine, you create it. And what I'm done with today will have to sit and cure for 3 to 6 months, depending. Because I used figs, I expect in this case for the stuff to be cured possibly as early as January. I'm really hopeful, especially because winters here are a little drier than summer, and getting this stuff to cure in the summer in humid Ohio is a pain in the fucking ass.
Can you talk a little bit about once it's done, about what the process is for heating it?
Okay, so everybody wants to know, what do you do to release the scent? Like, how do you burn kefi when it's actually incense? It's tricky because this is not how we're used to incense being made anymore. But the first thing is you do not burn it directly on a charcoal. I know that we've gotten used to getting self-lighting charcoals and putting resin and stuff on that to release the scent. This, if you do that directly on a charcoal, you end up with a scorched, burnt sugar smell, and it's really awful. You waste the kefi, and this stuff is not cheap. It is very, very expensive for all the stuff that goes into it, plus the time. So what do you do? There are a couple of burners on the market that are made more for this incenses that are kind of the kefi, their ancestor. And one of those incenses is known as Bakur, Bakhoor. It is still used widespread throughout the Middle East. And there are Bakur burners, which are actually handy little electrical burners. You plug them in, and they burn within a certain range that, with a little bit of tin foil or like a little it looks like a little tin cup. You put the incense in there and it releases the scent much more slowly. There's a couple of benefits to this. There's much less smoke. There's almost no smoke at all. And it lasts a lot longer. It with a Bakur burner or a similar burner, what happens is the incense, you're treating it a little bit more like scented wax. So you put it on there and you just let it like bubble and warm and heat up and just diffuse its scent throughout wherever you're working. Um, what I have found is temperature wise about the ideal temperature for kefi where you've got it hot enough to release the scent, but it's not so hot that it's scorching, is between about 180 degrees Fahrenheit and maybe 210. 210's on the like it starts to scorch, but if you're really impatient and you want it to heat up fast, you've got something that allows you to have a dial. I'll sometimes crank it up to 210, let it heat up, and then tone it back to about 180, 190. You can release the scent as low as about 170, 180. Lower than that, all you do is melt the kefi and it doesn't release the scent. So the one problem is the wax burners that you're going to find on the market don't burn hot enough to burn this incense. Other options are the little tea light burners, of which there are different variations. There's some that are carved out of soapstone. There's like a little cup on top that's out of stone, and it's got a base, and you put in the tea light. That will release the scent of kefi. That will get warm enough. There are some metal ones that actually allow you to adjust how high and how low the actual incense holding thing is. There are a couple of incense burners that are made for self-lighting charcoals, but they got a grate on top of them, a little bit above a little bit above where you would put the charcoal, and that holds the incense high enough that it will heat it up and release the scent without scorching it. And those usually are like these sort of fat, flat-looking brass things. The one caveat I have for those is almost all the ones that I've seen, their grate is very wide, and kefi is going to fall right through if you don't have like a little bit of tinfoil. Or I have started to see places sell like very, very tightly woven metal meshes that are disposable. And the thing is you are going to want to never burn the kefi directly on your bowl, on your incense burner, or on any of that. It is a very, very sticky mess to try to remove once it's done.
We've got a question. Is kefi beneficial for a psychic medium who channels?
So, kefi, yeah. So, the question is kefi beneficial to a psychic medium who channels? And I would say absolutely. So, this incense, in the writings of Plutarch and a number of other classical folks who were exploring Egypt during the Hellenic era, they talk about the traditions of the temple among the Egyptian priests. And they would burn incense in the morning, and at noon, and at night. And the incense that they burned at night was kefi. Uh, Kefi is the Hellenized version of the name. The original Egyptian is kapet, which basically just means incense. But what Kyphi is described as being is the scent that delights in the night, that opens the doors to dream and imagination. It is a scent that welcomes visions, that welcomes communication with spirits and the gods. And it's burnt at night as a way of opening that sort of soporific effect that leads into dream incubation, which was widely used throughout the ancient world as a way of communicating with spirits and the gods to gain visions, to gain prophecies, and sometimes simply to settle one's debt or settle relationships with the dead. So this is very much an incense that has a neat effect on opening the third eye, opening your awareness. I do not think that it must exclusively be burnt at night, but it has like this nice, fun, dreamy effect. To the point when people were reconstructing the ingredients for kefi, because one of the things is this stuff is old enough that some of the hieroglyphic names for ingredients we're not totally sure what they are. Like some of them may have gone extinct since then. Some of them, one of them specifically, Peker, which is Anglicanized Peker. Nobody's 100% sure what it is. There's a high likelihood that it could be something from the sycamore tree, and not an American sycamore, but the sycamore fig, which was sacred to Osiris. But we don't know for sure if it was the wood, if it was the fruit, if it was a ground compound of the leaves, if it was sycamore. But other suggestions for what Peker is specifically, because it's the big one that has like the biggest question mark, because of the soporific effects and the visionary effects attributed to this incense, a number of people have suggested that maybe it was hashish. So was it marijuana? Don't know. Was it opium? Don't know. Was it something else that has an effect? We're not sure. The one thing that does help guide us in reconstructing the ingredients is it was not only used as an incense, kefi was also used as a medicine and as a breath freshener. It was also used to freshen your clothes. So in the Ebers Papyrus and a couple of other medical treatises from ancient Egypt, we encounter variations on the ingredient list of making this particular stuff, but not as an incense, as a small little rolled pill that you take by mouth. What that tells us is none of the ingredients can be toxic. Now, the ancient Egyptians had a different idea of what constituted toxic. So if it made you kind of giddy and made you see stuff, then that might have been a bonus. So it doesn't rule some things out, which is to say that it wouldn't necessarily rule out opium. It wouldn't necessarily rule out hashish. And again, like there's a lot of debate. It's kind of fun to go down the rabbit hole of scholarly texts to see people who have explored this. The best book I have found on kefi and actually all of the related stuff of ancient Egyptian incense and perfume making is called Sacred Luxuries by an author, Lise, Lise, Maniche, Manniche. It's out of print, but you can still find it at like Abe Books. There's usually a couple up on an Amazon site. Any of your little Powell's or other indie bookstores, you're likely to be able to track a copy of it down.
Can you spell the first name one more time?
Lise, Lise, like Lisa, but the French version. Lise Maniche. Yeah, Sacred Luxuries. It's a lovely book. There's so much nifty stuff in there. She also is fantastic because she doesn't give you only one of the ingredient lists of kefi. She goes from the very first instance that we are aware of it being referenced and the ingredients that appear there, and like goes by date from the Ramessid time on down to the Ptolemaic time, and gives you like insight into the different variations and how the creation of the incense evolved over time, how it spread throughout the ancient world, so it was no longer exclusively an Egyptian thing. You could find ingredient lists in Syriac, so it made it all the way over to Syria. And it's just a fascinating thing to kind of pull together. I'm gonna stir a bit, don't mind me.
I think this myrrh may be just about ready. There's still a couple of bigger pieces.
Oh yeah, that looks great. Yeah, if you want to dump it out of there into that glass vessel, that would be great, because that molcajete is heavy as sin, and I am tired of lifting it up and trying to get all the bits out of it.
Very nice. I've opened up the floor for questions.
Okay.
What about kefi?
Yeah, well, pretty much about whatever. If you're curious, like, why did I start making kefi? It was almost 2 years ago now, a conversation about the role that scent plays in memory. And we were talking about scent for past life recall and reincarnation work. And the idea was, if we could track down something that was a very familiar, very unique scent as a trigger for certain memory time periods. And kefi leapt out as the one of the likeliest things to recreate for some of the folks that I work with.
Have you noticed if the cats react to the incense, the smell of it?
Uh, I can't say for sure if Bliss was being extra mouthy today because I wasn't sitting where she expected me to be, or she objected in some way to the scent of the frankincense. At different points in the ingredients, they react differently. So in one of the batches, it calls for mint, only 3 tablespoons for a batch this size, but specifically Egyptian mint. And Egyptian mint was known for being much milder than peppermint or spearmint. And over the summer, I did acquire a couple of Egyptian mint plants, but they are very finicky for where I live. And I don't hold out a whole lot of hope for getting actual usable mint out of them anytime soon. And I haven't been able to track down Egyptian mint like dried for anything. But having gotten the plants, dried 1 or 2 leaves, and like gotten a scent for it, what's actually closest, and this seems maybe a little weird, is cat mint. Like just enough of, like, it doesn't have like the sharp minty, but there is definitely menthol going on there. And so I've often used cat mint as a replacement for Egyptian mint in this, and you can predict exactly what cats think about that. In this case, I was mixing the cat mint with lemongrass, which smelled fantastic. Like each step along the way is almost its own incense. So like I was sitting there grinding, watching Critical Role and grinding lemongrass and cat mint as Ozzy's sitting there on the couch like, where's mine?
Where's my drugs? So someone has looked at the ingredient list and is wondering, where do you find the exact ingredients?
Oh, and that's why it's so damn expensive. All over the place. My best source was Wild Tree Essentials for frankincense and myrrh specifically, but they, because of COVID, have significantly cut back on what they offer. And unfortunately, that's been the case for many of the places I was getting for stuff. One of the ingredients, chios or gum mastic, it only can be harvested on one solitary island in Greece anymore. It used to be all over the ancient world, and the environmental situations that are necessary for these trees to produce this particular gum at this point only happens in Chios, which, as you can guess, makes it pretty pricey and difficult to get a hold of. It's an interesting resin. It's chewed as an actual gum. It is used in beauty products. It's used in desserts, and you can import it. It must be its import and its sale is overseen by basically like a Chios gum association, in the same way that like Parmesan, true Parmesan cheese can only come from Parmesan, Italy, and true types of French cuisine can only come from the region that they are known for, like cassoulet beans can only come from cassoulet. Chios gum can only come from them. If you see gum mastic sold from anywhere else in the world, it is not gum mastic. And it just isn't. I've started to see a bunch of like bullshit sites, and what they're selling you is probably pine resin, and it's not the same. So let's see. Places that I have started to source, Mountain Rose Herbs is one of the ones that carries a fair number of the things that I need. Herbco.com has a number of things as well. Some of the considerations are, do you want stuff that is organic or wild harvested or sustainably harvested versus stuff that is sort of industrially harvested? Govinda carries, a lot of frankincense, a lot of myrrh, benzoin, other things, but there's this huge industry that is growing for these incense ingredients, and especially because they've got a widespread use in the cosmetic industry right now. The downside is a lot of these things are becoming scarcer. They are being farmed and harvested into obscurity. And for me, I needed to know that they were being sustainably harvested. It's why I'm so sad that Wild Tree Essentials doesn't really do anything but green hojari in frankincense anymore, because all of their stuff was wild crafted. It was hand gathered, and you could see it. Like people's hair and like goat hair and stuff was still like this was stuff that was just like gathered on a hillside by folks that lived out there and packaged up and sent through the various import and whatnot. Most of the ingredients are not cheap. Smallflower.com was another place that I was getting some of my things. Now, I was on their site just the other day, and they don't have the same. They've got a lot of medical, like herbal supplements, and they do not have the individual dried and ground canisters of a lot of the things that I was using. So my lengthy answer is, you really have to shop around to get all the different ingredients, and it's tricky to begin with. But in the age of COVID, it's become even more difficult to get all of these. And prices have increased as well. I made a batch. Dragon's blood is not normally an ingredient in kefi, but during the lunar eclipse, I made a version where I was drawing on a lot of Setian symbolism. And I used dragon's blood, and I had dragon's blood lying around from something else. And then I went to go replenish my dragon's blood and discovered that it was like $160 a pound. Like, it was ridiculous. The price like quadrupled overnight, and it's all about like what's available. And COVID really screwed a lot of things up for this. I mean, for everything really, but. I mean, the raisins and the figs and whatnot are pretty easy. The wine is a little tricky too, because ancient Egypt, while Egypt itself now is certainly not known for its wine or winemaking, ancient Egypt was known for wine, and wine from the oases. So they made both date wine and real wine, and also a red beer that had henna and not hemlock, mandrake in it. Can't even imagine what that was like, but instead there was no hops, so to have like the bitters, it was mandrake. But their wine was, by all accounts in classic literature, red but sweet. Now, finding a sweet red wine on the market now is a little challenging.
Are there any other ancient incenses or scents that you want to try to recreate sometime?
So are there other ancient incenses and scents that I want to try to recreate at some point? There is a collection of magical texts called the Leiden Papyrus, and it references in a few of the magical workings incense that, from the description, is made the same way. A base of fruit. They describe having like a hunk of it. You grab a little ball as you need it, and you roll it in your fingers and you burn it. And they have The hard part with those is they do not give you the proportions, but it does mention what goes in it. So there's a couple of ancient magical incenses that now that I've got the sense of like how do you make kefi and what is the mix between how much fruit and how much honey and how much resin and how much wood, I want to try to recreate some of the magical incenses that are described in things like the Greek and Roman magical papyri, the Leiden papyrus, and related magical texts.
There was a question earlier. So when you're sorry, there's a cat in the window. When you're measuring out ingredients, do you worry about the amount that sticks to the containers as you put them in?
I mean, yeah. When I'm measuring out ingredients, do I worry about what sticks to the containers when I put it in? Yes, and I think some of that is growing up real poor, where like, my grandmother grew up in the Great Depression, so she never met a pot that she didn't like scrape clean to the point where she's like scraping the finish off of the pot to get everything out. There is a certain amount that's going to get left behind. Like, here's a really good example. So here was where I was. This one is where we were boiling honey and frankincense. And as you can tell, there's just no getting all of that out of there. Also, cleanup is a bitch. Because the frankincense melts into the honey, and I mean, honey's sticky enough as it is, but the frankincense is a resin, and it turns into like, it's hard to get out of there. In the case of like the honey, I add just a little bit more than the recipe would call for, partly because at this stage, honey is where most of my fluid is coming from. I've used the 3 cups of wine throughout the long process, and that is very well soaked into this stuff. There is, in much the same way that an iron skillet cures over its use and you don't want to scrape that off of it, this copper pot has discoloration on the inside from just batches and batches of kefi, and that adds to the usefulness. Like, it's cured with like a scent of everything, and I'm unlikely to use this for much anything other than a kefi or a kefi adjacent incense. At this point, I have a whole set of tools and pots and other kitchen implements that are exclusively used in the incense. Because one of the things you don't want to do is, if you have a mortar and pestle and you're grinding culinary herbs, you do not want to switch back and forth between that and your medicinal herbs or your incense or perfumery herbs, because not all of them are safe to eat. And some residue stays behind. A good example is, here's the pestle from my molcajete, and like some of that's not coming off.
Have you ever tried boiling salt water in pots to loosen up the residues?
I have not tried boiling salt water in the pots. What I do to loosen up the residue, like in that, is really just heating up some water in it. Haven't even like, I don't need the salt. It needs to be warm enough to be able to like wipe it off. So basically, heating it up assists with cleaning it off. Once any of the resins have gotten cold and hardened again, you're not getting those off. You need some heat, but enough that you can also get your hand in there and wipe.
Here's a new question. Can you use kefi as a paste, like to put on your forehead or your arms?
Oh,
For high magic or higher consciousness?
so can you apply kefi to like your forehead and your arms, like as a paste or something? And I'll be honest, yeah, I've done that. I've been experimenting with, dropping a couple balls of kefi into an unscented like hand lotion to like see if it permeates, because the scent is very intense and it permeates everywhere. The little bits that I sell, I suggest to people that like don't burn all of it at once. Like, have a couple of pieces of it and just stick them in a drawer, like in like a little like a little muslin bag so it breathes, and that scent will permeate everywhere and everything. You'll get this lovely like resiny sweetness with a hint of frankincense and myrrh through your clothes. Again, the ancient Egyptians used it for that. Like you'd hang a little bag of it, and it would be in all of your clothes. It would freshen up your linens and your laundry. I am also working toward making like a kefi solid. That was a little trickier. I've only just recently been able to track down the last couple of essential oils. Um, but my goal for that is, the basic like hand lotion, lip balm that is beeswax and olive oil, a mixture of those two. You melt it, and sometimes you have the olive oil already infused with something like calendula or rose petals. And as you heat them up and mix them together, then you add your little like mix of essential oils and whatnot. And if you have things that are going to like stir in there and stew, and then you strain it out, I plan on doing that with uh, all of the basic things that go into kefi. The hardest one was trying to find gum mastic essential oil, because the kicker can only get it from the Chios Association. It's only imported. They will not import any fluids into the United States. Canada's fine. Mexico's fine. I don't know who we pissed off, or if it's some quirk of our taxes and tariffs, but getting mastic essential oil was not happening from Chios. Now, fortunately, Etsy exists, and it looks, and I'm skeptical, but I want to play with it. There is an Etsy seller who gets the gum mastic and makes their own essential oil from it. So I have a little bit of that, and that was my final ingredient for what will be a wearable kefi, not intended as incense, but intended to anoint yourself, to anoint your tools, for magic work, ritual work, stuff like that.
So, does burning kefi aggravate asthma?
Does burning kefi aggravate asthma? One of the handy things with kefi is if you're doing it right, it doesn't create a lot of smoke. So as somebody who has asthma, and really, like the older I get, the worse the allergies get, this does not trigger my allergic responses. Now, the thing to be aware of, if you have an allergy to pine, any sort of pine, this might be bad for you. There is pine resin. Gum mastic has got like a piney scent to it. There are pine nuts in it as part of like the base. So if you are allergic to pine, this is probably not an option. Now you can make it without the pine. The pine resin is only 3 tablespoons. You can replace that with gum mastic. Gum mastic is not from a pine tree, even though it has a piney scent to it. It's actually from something related to pistachio. And you can replace the pine nuts with something similar, like sunflower seeds. I haven't tried pumpkin seeds, but as far as I can tell, the pine nuts are there to give you a little bit of fiber and a little bit of binding agent. If you're allergic to cinnamon, also a problem, but again, you can substitute it out. It will change some of the overall scent of the kefi. There are 2 things that you really, well, okay, 4 things that you can't remove, and still, you can't take the honey out. The honey is integral to it for a number of reasons. Not only the scent of the honey, but also its preservative qualities, and it binds stuff together. So you have to have the honey. It was a sacred substance in ancient Egypt, so it is integral also to the magic of the kefi. So I apologize for anybody who is vegan and just can't do honey. I do not know if there is any option to replace honey in this mix. So honey, frankincense, myrrh, dried fruit. The wine is pretty important too, but you can use wine. I've used honeymead as well. It is something that should be, a fermented beverage. I would not recommend beer or ale because it is lending a scent. It's another reason why you want to look for a sweet red. This particular batch I did not go for a sweet red. I wanted something that had a lot of rich fruit, dark fruit scents to it. And because I was making this on Samhain, this one leapt out at me. It's called Dearly Beloved. And as advertised, it's a blend. And it has, let's see, dark cherry plum, spicy vanilla oak, and has exactly like the kind of scent profile that I wanted to have as the one of the base notes in here. And that's, you use most of a bottle of wine, but never the entire bottle.
I mean, I think of one thing to do with that.
At this point, it can be done. It's been sitting around for a little while. I don't know if it's still like actually drinkable or if it just should go to marinate something food-like.
Have you heard of flying ointments?
Have I heard of flying ointments? Yes, I have. Actually, my undergrad work in college for English studies was Shakespeare, Women and Witches. So flying ointments were hard to avoid, and there's a lot of warnings that need to come with trying to recreate flying ointments from the recipes that come down to us. Now, there's been a recent kerfluffle among witch talk and Instagram witches trying to claim that things like Eye of Newt and Toe of Frog and some of the sketchier things in the flying ointments were just basically slang for different plants. And so they don't literally mean the tongue of a lapwing. They're actually talking about a plant that looks like the tongue of a lapwing. And while I can totally see what they are getting at with that, as someone who is familiar with the tradition of magic that goes all the way back to the Hellenic world, 300 BCE to 300 CE, and where these traditions inherited a lot of their magic. They totally mean animal parts when they're talking about animal parts. More than that, in flying ointments, there are a lot of things that are not just a little bit toxic, not just a little bit like makes you feel like you're flying high. No, it's like you get this wrong and you are dead. You are convulsing on the floor, and it is not even a bad trip. It's just a trip to the cemetery. So belladonna, aconite, otherwise known as wolfsbane, mandrake, mandragora, all of these are very poisonous. And belladonna, atropine, while it can be used and harnessed and is in modern medicine, we do not have in kitchen witchery and our own little stuff the capacity to work with that stuff safely. So my strong recommendation is research flying ointments and flying oils out of curiosity. If it is your goal to recreate them, do so with the utmost caution and substitute out the truly dangerous things like mandrake and belladonna and aconite, because unless you've got like a high-end medical setup, you are not going to be able to put together versions of it you won't be able to control the dose, basically. So be very careful with flying ointments if you're trying to go like by the book.
Can you talk about whether kefi was used to like be a consciousness awakening agent in Egypt?
So the question is, was kefi used as kind of a consciousness awakening agent, something to wake us up, open the doors of imagination and awareness? And what I can say to that, and again, this is Plutarch, who writes about his experience with this incense and also what the Egyptian priests told him about it. And I'm not going to be able to quote it exactly. I think I have the quote up on my website. But it loosens the bonds of imagination and throws wide the gates of dream, and creates this sort of visionary effect in those who breathe it that really seems to imply that it makes them more open to the other world, and that this was a feature, not a flaw. This was one of the reasons why it was burned at night as kind of a Vespers thing. So as the day gave way to night, and as like the affairs of the waking world gave way to evening, and the dark more associated with mystery and spirits and the realms of dream, Kefi helped to herald that shift. So it is a liminal scent. It is a liminal incense, and from my experience with it, you can harness it in all of that liminality as a thing that takes you and elevates you betwixt and between. So, betwixt and between waking consciousness and dreaming consciousness, rational mind and abstract mind, this world and the other world. It's pretty nifty stuff.
Do you think it would be possible to use like a red mead instead of a red wine?
Could you use a red mead instead of a red wine in this? Oh yeah, I'm certain of it. The lunar eclipse Kyphi, I'd mentioned it was a little bit more sane. It is the subtitle for that one is Protection During the Dark Hours, and I made it hot on the heels of like the George Floyd protests and when everything started to like really shift in the United States, and it was a time that felt very scary and a time that felt like protection would be really handy. And while Kefi's initial purpose is to sort of like open you up and open up your senses and like make you more psychic, invite more psychic and more spirit communication, I wanted something that brought that, but also brought some solar aspects. The sun in eclipse, that ties into the myth of Set, not Set Typhon. I could go on forever about this, but simply put, the very, very old mythology around the great god Set in the ancient Egyptian pantheon is Set was great of strength. This was one of his titles. He wasn't a bad guy. He gets demonized later on, and that's a whole other thing. But before, when he wasn't the uncle, but the twin of Horus, when the sun god Ra would descend beneath the horizon and ship, ride in his ship throughout the hours of night. Set stood at the prow with his spear, the tip of meteoric iron. Set's metal was basically the bones of the stars. And Set and only Set was strong enough and brave enough to overcome the serpent Apophis, or Apep. And Apep was a great threat, the coils of this enormous serpent who, in a lot of ways, represented entropy and void and chaos. As the bark of the sun god went through the dangerous hours of the night, ultimately to be reborn the next dawn, Set was the powerful deity who protected the sun at his most vulnerable during the dark hours. And that's why the lunar eclipse Kefi is a Setian incense. I brought in a number of things. That's why I put in the dragon's blood. Red is the color of Set. The Tesheru are his people, companions of Set. And so bringing in both like an Egyptian mythos and also the core purpose of Kefi to like invite spirits and invite communication, and also to bring in these ancient powers. And I, instead of wine, I used mead because it felt more. There's no mythological connection between Set and mead. Let me be clear. But in my personal gnosis for that particular thing, that felt like a better choice than the sweet red wine that I've been using.
Somewhat off the topic of Kyphi, but on the topic of things visible on the screen, folks are curious what goes into your Starbucks drink.
Oh, this one. What goes into my Starbucks drink? Actually, this is my hot cocoa. I can't put a whole lot of caffeine anymore. It's very sad. So this is hot cocoa, and it is. At this point, they know exactly who it is when we pull through.
You call it prima donna?
No, Goldilocks.
Goldilocks hot cocoa.
Because I like most Starbucks drinks are just way too sweet for me. So like I experimented with like how few pumps of anything goes in this to be just right for me. As it turns out, 2.5 pumps of mocha and half a pump of peppermint and milk, and that is my cocoa.
Mm. Let me run this by you before I actually ask it.
Okay.
I need your eyes.
Okay. This one. Oh, yeah, I don't answer any questions about that because
I thought
because if fans feel duped, if fans feel duped, think about how the rest of us felt.
all right. Whoa, this thing is jumping around. Have you ever used vampire blood incense?
Oh, yeah, actually, I like it a lot. It's if we're thinking about the same one, it's made by the same people who do Nam Champa. I also like, oh, and I hate the name of it, but I love it. It's Super Hit. So they make a number of different stick incenses that are my go-to for just quick, easy, doesn't take me like 11 days and then some to make.
Have you ever tried making your own flying ointment?
I have not tried to make my own flying ointment. And especially because with enough, I know enough about herbalism to have looked at the flying ointment ingredients and to just go, oh, hell no, I don't need that. Like that was not for me. The other thing is, and this gets tricky because while I definitely do stuff that falls under witchcraft, and I definitely do things that fall under magic, I've never identified as a witch. And that archetype never really quite fit for me, to the point where when people assumed I was a witch when I was in my early teens, or my early 20s and late teens, I got pissed off. Like it didn't fit right. Now, some of that is at the time, on one hand, we had the satanic panic going on, so mainstream society saw all witches and witchcraft as black, satanic, awful, blah, blah, blah. Whereas, kind of pushing back against that misinformation, most of the actual practitioners of witchcraft and Wicca at the time were very, very white light. Like they erred on the side of removing anything dark. And a good portion of my path is about the shadows, about death, about what lies beyond the light. And as a result, what I associated with witchcraft was a certain level of aggressive feminism, which was very widespread in the late 80s and early 90s in witchcraft. Also, a push and a bias toward light, life, fertility, sex, and reproduction. None of those appealed to me. Like, I remember being part of, I got invited to a lesbian coven of witches in Cleveland called the Violet Flame, and they were fantastic people. They were lovely. They had really awesome rituals that were very, like they loved all the ladies that were there. They were inclusive in terms of if you were, female of some sort. And remember that that's not really inclusive. So the problem that I had was it was so polarized toward lady vagina magic. Like, and I don't know how else to put it, but like all of the visualizations and all of the rituals were like getting in touch with your uterus and your vulva and your ability to procreate. I'm just like, this is not me. Like, if anything, early on gave me a sense that I was more asexual and ace and definitely not identified female. Like that, those rituals did it for me. I think I heard Olivia outside too.
Okay. Probably.
So, nothing against witches and witchcraft. And actually, I really love the fact that, the further we get away from the satanic panic, the more there's this merging of like what the way I practice magic, the way I came to magic, that it's non-theistic. You know, there's no, for my tradition, there's no like god or goddess as such. Um, Not to say that they don't exist, but that's not what we work with. And finding that there's more comfort for that, there's more that there are more people who are okay with that we have a dialogue about it, and that nobody on either side of left-hand path or right-hand path, dark paganism versus light and life paganism, like folks are actually able to discourse much more productively now than they did back in the 90s. But the kerfluffles in the 90s definitely pushed me in a different way. It's one of the reasons why I became a founding force in the vampire community, because it allowed us to have a magical archetype instead of witch vampire, and allowed us to explore more fully the spirituality and the magic of night, of immortality, of death and what is beyond death, um, the mystery of the darkness, and honestly, a little bit of like predatory nature in when is that appropriate? Like, does everything always have to be positive and generative? Can magic also cut things away or take things away and still be productive, still be positive overall?
So, question, two parts. Are you known as a white witch, and do you give private readings?
So, two-part question: am I known as a white witch? Nope, I'm not a witch. I do magic, but and I think at this point, witchcraft has expanded to be such uh, an inclusive umbrella, delightfully so, that I will say that a lot of the stuff that I do does fall under witchcraft. But I don't identify as a witch. Do I do private readings? I do not, for a whole lot of reasons, not the least of which being I just have a hard time putting a price on it, and competing in any way with other people who do that. But more than that, I have a hard time getting out of my own way when someone comes to me with something that they're very emotionally invested in for the outcome. And a lot of folks who are looking for private readings mostly come to me hoping that I can talk to a recently deceased relative, or there's something very personal to them and they want an answer. And in some cases, they usually already know what they want to hear. And I have a lot of ethical problems because sometimes the answer is not what they want to hear. And want, I just don't want what happens next if you tell someone who really, really wants to hear something what they don't want to hear. Or when they're talking about trying to talk to a deceased relative or a recently deceased relative, or heaven help me, the number of folks who want me to find the dismembered remains of their murdered relative, that has happened distressingly way more times than I would like. And the fact of the matter is the weight of, but what if I'm wrong? Because this is an inexact art. And no matter how right and spot on I am 98% of the time, there is always that 2%. And when it means so much to someone, when it is a matter of closure, when it is going to wound them emotionally to not get the answer they're expecting, I just find it easier to say no. And, you know, that's not to say that there aren't plenty of people who do that work and do it well and do it justly and ethically. But what I want to say is if you're looking for someone to do readings for you, to talk to your dead relatives, in the same way that you would shop around for a therapist or a doctor, and you wouldn't settle for for somebody who like,
That's marketing down.
well, somebody who seems not right for you, like you have a gut instinct of like, maybe, or you look at their price and you're just like, follow your instinct and shop around, ask for references, either from the person directly or talk to friends and associates whose opinions you respect, and get some referrals that you can explore, Don't just go with someone because they make a promise to you that they would be, I am the great Lord Poobah who can answer all of your questions. Because usually if that guy or gal or in between, the person who tells you that they have all the answers is really the person who just wants to sell you something. I need to do a little bit of intense stir here. One of the other reasons why copper pot is the heat. It's better at heating slowly and thoroughly and all over the place, and basically the way in which it heats is better for this long process of slowly boiling the kefi down so that it gets thick. There will be a point, hun, that I will send you upstairs to the Tolkien room. I have removed the lunar eclipse kefi from the pastry board. Yeah, we'll need the pastry board. For folks who might want to try this, one of the things that I learned pretty quick is, especially this stage of kefi making, if you have some familiarity with making candy, that gives you a sense of how this works, because this is very much like trying to boil something that has a lot of sugar in it down to from the softball stage to the hardball stage. You don't quite want to get it to like the crack stage of like hard candy.
Now, when you said sometime, did you mean like right now?
No, I'm not close.
Okay. Okay, here's another question. As someone who has vampiric tendencies, do you find it altering to yourself if you were to deep dive into someone to do a reading?
So somebody who has vampiric tendencies, does it alter me in any way if I do a deep dive to do a reading? When I was younger, I hadn't quite sorted out the process of connecting to someone and cycling with them. So that was certainly in my 20s. One of the reasons why I didn't like doing readings is I get so much of the other person in me. And that is that still remains a part of my process, but I've learned how to filter out. So like to do a reading, I am definitely making a connection to a person. Ideally, there is some exchange to like get a good feel for what's going on with them. And a lot of that is very much a function of how I vampirically work with energy, which is not how everybody does readings. It's another reason why I don't really like, again, to do just random readings with people. I'm trying to think of like, at what point did I learn how to stop like taking a lot when I was doing stuff? And it's really about finding good boundaries and setting up good filters so that I can make the connection and I can sort of skim off of their emotions, their thoughts, and get a sense of what's going on with them without without nibbling, I guess. I've got very, very stern rules for myself about taking energy from other people, to the point where at events, there's plenty of folks in the paranormal and psychic communities who are shocked to find that I identify as a vampire, because they expect that means that I would be taking energy all the time, and their experience instead is at events and things, I'm putting energy out, like I'm this big shiny beacon, and it's because I do that thing that several very well-known performers are acquainted with. Dolly Parton being one, she describes it. Tori Amos describes it. And if you start like reading between the lines of a number of other performers, it's how you learn to exist up on stage, especially if you are sensitive to energy at all, where you take the attention and the expectations of the crowd into you to fuel you, and then give back. And it becomes this alchemical, transformational process where what you take in and what you put out, in the process of transmuting that attention and expectation, you create something that is even more than what you took in. But that is not what most people think of as vampirism. It is what Dolly Parton thinks of as vampirism because there was a fantastic interview she did years ago where she identified as a psychic vampire. So there's more of us than you'd think.
And there's, while you've been talking about this, there's been a bunch of questions about like how do you protect yourself from energy vampires? Are there a few easy tips and tricks?
Give me a couple of minutes here to do some stirring. It's getting interesting. I expect there to be a sudden and renewed interest in vampires again. Stacey Abrams is A Buffy fan, and B, really into vampires. No, that came across my Twitter. That came across my Twitter feed earlier, and I got to tell the story of when I got to work with James Marsters, aka Spike. Which also reminds me, I've had a pretty interesting life.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like there's one element in common for your whole life, which is you. I might just say that you're a pretty interesting person.
I think you're biased, my dear.
Well, you can make a very good argument for that. But I think there's also a lot of people who would think that I'm not biased, I'm just perceptive.
Okay, there was a question about how to protect yourself from psychic vampires. So, Psychic Vampire 101, there are plenty of folks who are psychic vampires or energy vampires, and they have no fucking clue, which means that they can't make responsible choices about when or how to take energy from people. Folks who are vampiric and understand what that means take energy from people with consent and choose when and how, and are able to set up a healthy exchange, in arguably an exchange that benefits all parties. Which also means that the word vampire starts to be like, it's the best thing we got, but it kind of sucks. Anyway, so unconscious psychic vampires, and I will also acknowledge that there are some folks who either learn how to vampirize people's energy or who are vampiric like me, but they are not as ethical as I am. But let's go with the unconscious ones first. They're the most common. If you watch What We Do in the Shadows, Colin does a fantastic job of representing the worst type of psychic vampire everybody ever has to deal with, to the point where I am 100% certain that whoever created his character has heard several of my interviews. Because I will describe one of two types of unconscious psychic vampires all of us have encountered at one point or another. The first one I call Old Aunt Edna. Old Aunt Edna is someone who doesn't much leave her house. She is pretty much a shut-in, and she is older, and you come over usually out of obligation, and she probably has a little bit of hoarder thing going on. Like, she's just at that point where like everything is just and you don't really want to go visit Aunt Edna. You do it only because she's your aunt, and nobody else seems to want to go visit her. And you sit there and she talks to you about everything that is wrong in her life and all the stuff that has gone wrong. And you get to hear about her bunions and her hemorrhoids and probably some shit that she's making up as well. And as she talks to you about how hard her life is, you're just sitting there sinking further into her couch. And yes, listening to her is taxing on an emotional level. It's a lot of emotional labor, so it does have a level of exhaustion. But by the time you're done, you really truly feel like you've been sucked dry. And Aunt Edna, the more she goes, like, she actually starts to seem like she's getting something out of this. She doesn't realize she's eating you, but vampirically, she's feeding off of your attention. She's feeding off of your energy. Was she always vampiric? Maybe. Is she vampiric now because she has so limited, either because of disability or because of mental illness, or simply because she's just kind of curled in on herself and just doesn't have the wherewithal or the desire to get out anymore? She's not having a healthy exchange with ordinary sources of vitality. either just going out and talking with people casually, going out in the world, walking around in nature. So as she shuts herself off more and more, or is shut off due to circumstance, she doesn't have a source. You become that source. And because she's not conscious of it, she is very efficient with it. She will find ways to push buttons and to get people to give her what she needs. And again, she's not aware of it. There's no malevolence, as much as it can be kind of a pain in the butt. And the reason that I typify this as old Aunt Edna is it's usually someone from an age group and background where sitting her down and saying, hey, have you heard about psychic vampires, is probably going to get a negative response or a response of significant disbelief. She's not going to want to hear it, and having that conversation would be incredibly challenging. So, old Aunt Edna, and then that guy in the office, who we can now call Colin because there he is that dude who either just talks your fucking ear off, or like has no sense of your personal space, gets up in your personal space, has a certain sort of domineering quality. He knows what buttons to push to get a response from you, often an aggressive or a defensive response. And yes, interactions with him are unpleasant, and you can come up with lots of reasons for why you feel shaky and unpleasant afterwards. And also, there's always that one person where it feels like there's more going on, where it feels like really substantially something has been taken from you. And they, on some level, know it, and they're certainly aiming to take it. And that is another unconscious psychic vampire. Sometimes they're totally aware of what they're doing. They might never call it vampirism, but they sure as fuck know that they're preying on people. I'll get into how you protect yourself in a minute. I gotta stir.
It's always the dangerous part of Kefi plus Q&A. And at what point do you need to find that room?
Soon. Actually, around now would probably be good.
Should I sprinkle?
Yeah. Okay, let me stir it in. It looks like toffee chips.
Delicious.
I'll warn you for when we're rolling this batch. Both the myrrh and the frankincense, both from Wild Tree, had little bits of tree. So actually, like wood and stuff. I picked some of the bigger ones out, but I think that we're still going to have a couple of pieces where we are like, what's that? Oh, that's wood from a frankincense tree. A little bit of bark.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah. That's good. I'm gonna step and grab something. And Kat's mom, these are fantastic.
Yeah, they're amazing.
So much more comfortable than the one that I was using too. Like my hands, I'm not working on like 15 blisters. The other one, the way it was made, was just.
I mean, not card stirring, I'm guessing.
No.
This smells really good. Is this the last ingredient?
Yes, this is the last ingredient. And it's just a matter of getting it firmer and then letting it cure.
Mm-hmm. It firm up.
So if you are interested in emptying out all of the various things of honey, that metal chopstick has got honey and only honey on it. If you would like to have a little,
if I want to help.
Yes, if you want to help. That's yeah, just dump it in. And
we're done.
No, we're not done because yep. Do I like to get all the bits out? Yes, I do. Yeah, what you can't see is there's like a whole bunch of empty honey jars over there that I'm just like, dear, would you like a little bit of honey?
I mean, this chopstick is really convenient for it. This is really good.
Yeah.
Wow.
Oops. Good, good. For people who are coming into the feed and have no idea what I'm doing, I'm in fact not cooking food. This is not brownie batter. This is an ancient temple incense, the recipe of which appears on the walls of the laboratory room at the Temple of Edfu complex in Egypt. And that particular recipe is over 2,000 years old.
Is this exactly the recipe, or what are the modifications?
The modifications in this one is the regular amount of cinnamon, and then I also replaced an ingredient called pecker, which I usually use ground sycamore fig wood, and instead of that, even more cinnamon. So this one is cinnamon heavy, and then the fruit base is mostly fig as opposed to raisins or dates. And I replaced the pine resin with an extra portion of gum mastic, and cyperus root was replaced with galangal. And then the only variations are the different types of frankincense and myrrh that I used. Yeah, you probably want to put that over here. But as with every kefi, each day I added new stuff. I kept a log of it. So that can get typed up and shared on the website. And if you're curious about my kefi, this one is not for sale yet. It won't be ready and up for sale for several months. Probably early February at the absolute earliest. It depends on how quickly it cures. And there are 2 previous batches that are still available, Silver Mirror and Lunar Eclipse. Both of them were made this year in 2020. I am sold out of almost all of the stuff from 2019, most of which I do have some that's left, but I've kept it for House Kipperu and my own personal use. There is an in-between batch. I'm really thinking about taking that in-between batch that I'd made for Haunted Salem Live. Like there were 2 versions that I made. There was the one that was like super heavy with the resin because I knew I could only count on burning it on a charcoal, that I wasn't going to be able to like scare up a Bakur burner in Salem on short notice. But I did make a kefi version, basically using the original as like you do sourdough, so like as a mother starter. So I used like a chunk of it, and I added, and there's that. It's a little bit different, but it definitely holds a lot of the initial scent of that first 2019 batch.
Do you have a recommendation of what the best incense would be to purify at home?
Okay, I haven't forgotten that we want to talk about vampires and protection, but this is a really good question. What's a good incense to help purify a home? Incense and different plant matter used to fumigate or cleanse spaces is something that you'll find in numerous cultures around the globe. One technique that has been picked up and used throughout the New Age, witchcraft, and paranormal communities in recent decades has been smudging, or at least the use of white sage in a smudge stick. Because if we're talking about a smudge ceremony, the ceremony itself is specific to Native Americans. But if you're talking about smoke cleansing with sage, a lot of folks do that. Now, the thing is because that got picked up and shown on a lot of television media and movies and whatnot, most people, that's the first time they come to the idea that you can use a plant to clear a space, and you can use burning the plant as a way of fuming the space. However, white sage is by no means the only thing you can use. Uh, if your ancestors hailed from Europe, frankincense, myrrh, gum benzoin were all used, in addition to things that were known as strewing herbs. So things that were used to freshen the scent of the space, but also to clear the air, because there was a point in time where our word malaria, the disease malaria, it means bad air, malaria. The belief was that bad smells, that some miasma, some badness in the air was what conveyed illness in certain time periods. So to clear the air, to cleanse the air, was not only to drive out spirits and unwanted influences, but it was literally to purge the air of poison, of illness. And so frankincense is good, myrrh is good. A mix of the two is pretty traditional for anybody who hails from a Christian background. Uh, Gum benzoin is a favorite of mine. It's a primary ingredient in any of the amber or ambrosia mixes. It's very sweet. It's got like a honeyed vanilla smell. Sandalwood. And sandalwood was, for a long time, like the European answer to Palo Santo. You can use Palo Santo, and again, that's a New World plant. It's a little bit of very fragrant wood. It's another one, though, where it's become popular enough that somebody will probably sell you Palo Santo, and it may just be something that was soaked in the oil or spritzed down. So, buyer beware. You can also use rosemary, thyme, many of your kitchen herbs, and smolder them the same way that you would white sage to create a scented smoke to try to clear a space. Now, one of the benefits with that is rosemary, thyme, similar. White sage has natural properties that also are antiseptic. Thyme, if you've ever used Listerine, the original Listerine has an ingredient, the active ingredient in original Listerine is thymol, and it is from thyme, the simple, humble plant that we put in food, usually on chicken and whatnot. So there's interesting history with the plants that we use and the resins in the woods, because there's spiritual associations, there's magical associations, but there are also, at this point, provable medicinal applications. Frankincense is an antiviral and an antiseptic. It's one of the reasons why I can make this kefi, and it will sit around for weeks and it will cure for months, and it's not going to ever grow anything nasty on it. It will not go bad. The honey and the frankincense and the myrrh and the gum mastic all make sure that doesn't happen. Myrrh is used widely in like toothpastes and a number of other things for the mouth. Myrrh was also used extensively in ancient Egyptian mummification, again, for the purpose that it's an antiseptic, that it would help preserve things by driving off mold and mildew and other sorts of nasty things that happen in horses. And by extension, that's part of the magic in using those. There is this healing property. You have to understand that in the ancient world, magic and medicine were not separate things. They were like this. So if something has a magical property to heal, it was also believed at the time that it was used as a medicine for that. And the neat thing is now that we can, deconstruct things and do little chemistry experiments on them, we can find that there are compounds in a lot of these that hold true, that there is an antiviral, that there is antiseptic qualities. A little bit more questionable in recent years, folks are proposing that frankincense is also anti-cancer. There is nothing to 100% back that up, but studies are being done. So don't bank on it, but it certainly isn't a bad thing. Burn frankincense to literally clear the air. And in this age of COVID, having one more thing, if you're out of Lysol, to fumigate your house and help clear the air, literally cleansing it with something that is known to be antiseptic. Not a bad thing. Benefit, smells really good.
A question getting back on the topic of vampirism.
Yeah.
Can vampirism be used in healing a person from past trauma?
Yep. Okay. So I haven't gotten into how to protect yourself from vampires, but another question that came up is a really, really useful one. Can vampirism be used to help someone heal from past trauma? So I know when we say vampire, for folks who still think of like the pop culture portrayal of vampires or Dracula or Lestat or anything, um, it's going to be hard to wrap your head around the idea that people who are vampiric, that this is a type of energy work. It is on the spectrum of psychic ability and psychic awareness. It is yet one more flavor of how people interact magically, psychically, energetically in a metaphysical way. And it's not necessarily always a bad thing. And in fact, actually, if you get a handle on it, you know what's going on with it. Vampires have a lot more in common with world traditions that we identify as shamanic. And that is important to this question because in a number of shamanic traditions, there's such a thing as soul retrieval. And more than that, there is this idea that illness and problems are caused by intrusions. In some respects, it's a metaphor for like the pieces of woundedness, of trauma that we're carrying, that we've allowed to accrete inside of ourselves. And there are shamanic techniques for helping someone release that, or literally going in and sucking it out, pulling it out, biting it out, sucking it like you would poison from a rattlesnake bite. Folks who are vampiric are uniquely suited for that. It is the very nature to connect to the energy of people and to cycle through that energy. And most folks who are vampiric are very capable of taking negative, unpleasant, or stagnant stuff, and they can pull it out of the person, process it, use it for themselves, discard what they can't. And the result being they were able to remove this intrusion, this little accreted bit of trauma, and spit it out like the pit of an apricot, and also get what they need out of this process. So yes, vampiric abilities have a really useful application to sin eating, to removing trauma, to removing negative energy or stagnant energy. And I would argue that one of the great strengths and benefits of learning what your vampirism is and how it works, if you suspect that this is a capacity you have, is it's a profound healing skill. It's just cutting away, it's removing, it's sucking out. And our society typically sees healing in a positive way, in a generative way. You give energy to people, you direct white light at them. But as we know from cancer treatments, sometimes taking, sometimes cutting away, sometimes removing is just as healing. Gotta stir. While I'm doing this, simplest way to protect yourself from somebody you think is a psychic vampire is the vast majority of folks who are vampiric, especially if they're unconscious about it, have interacted with you within the past 15 minutes before you felt like something happened. If you feel that you have been attacked or vampirized, chances are the person is still within eye contact. Chances are they are somebody that you just interacted with. They can see you, you caught their attention, they may have talked to you, they may have touched you. So what's the quickest and easiest thing to do? Remove yourself from the room and break eye contact. Especially the ones who are unconscious about what they're doing. You are only a victim of opportunity. You were there, you were a target because you were the best or the easiest or the most interesting. You caught their eye. Literally removing yourself from the space and removing yourself from their attention in most cases will break the contact. And then you can ground, center, shield, rest, regroup, and everything will be fine. Stir. I am sorely tempted to put the heat up a little bit, but I think that that's a bad idea.
I'm making a list of questions.
Okay. I mean, there will always be questions.
This is true.
And thank you for keeping me company, because this is a long process. Oh, in case people were wondering, the t-shirt is Shirt Punch.
Yeah, many people commented on that. I hadn't gotten to mention it.
Yep. Anyway, shirtpunch.com has a lot of fun t-shirts, and they're fairly inexpensive. And the only downside is they feature new ones like every 24 hours. And if you don't grab them while they're up, you will probably never see them again. Small batch artisanal snark.
Is this batch the same as the last one?
This batch of kefi is different. And I make an effort to make every batch of kefi a little bit different. This one is named Phoenix, and the intention that I have sat with each day as I add new ingredients for this one is rising from the ashes and the renewal that must come after a long period of difficulty. There's a reason why I wanted to make it around the election.
Thanks for that honey.
You're welcome, dear. As you can tell, like I emptied out like all of the ones that had started to crystallize, and oh yeah, there's another one. That one is a real pain to get, like because of the shape of the thing.
I'll do what I can.
Oh, don't feel obligated.
I go.
Okay, maybe that's too much. All right, just under 2 is where we can be before I start scorching the bottom. Patience, not really one of my virtues, but this is something that requires it. So I'm using a flat-bottomed spoon because it's a flat-bottom pot, and I have to scrape everything off the edges and everything off the thing and make sure that it's evenly heating. Oh, you know, I actually want to mention there is an Etsy shop called The Scented Gin. And I have looked among a lot of places that are making various types of kefi, or what they claim to be kefi. She's, I assume it's a she, I don't, the person who owns the Scented Gin is pretty clearly using the recipe from the Ebers Papyrus as their main focus. And this one is Ebers Kefi 2020. And it is so cute. I haven't burned it yet, but as a bit of a connoisseur of kefi at this point, it's very nicely put together. It's lovely. Like she makes this like whole 1 ounce pastille, stamps it, and hers is a little bit more resin heavy than mine. So and it has camphor. That's the one thing that's different between the recipes, and on the camphor, and probably shouldn't have done that. But it also makes it a lot more dense and thick. Like this is a cake of kefi. You would not burn that entire thing. You would break off a small bit. And in this case, what you would get is like little, maybe like pea size, maybe a little bit bigger than a pea sized ball that we've rolled together. And you don't have to burn that whole piece. What I recommend if you purchase kefi from me, that kefi is still going to be soft. You can squish it. It's coated very faintly with a little bit of benzoin powder. You can pinch off at least half of it or even a third roll it a little bit and squish it into like a lentil shape. And so you spread more surface area and then put it on whatever you're using to warm it. So you've got like the maximum spread of substance to surface.
Can you say this more, because folks are interested in buying the Phoenix kefi, when you expect it to be ready?
So this particular batch of kefi, Phoenix, is going to have to cure for at least 3 months. And what does that take us to? So this is the 11th of November to the 11th of December to my birthday, the 11th of January, probably to February.
So it'll be close to Valentine's Day.
Yeah, it'll be close to Valentine's Day. It would be cool. I'm going to check to see if it will be ready on my birthday on January 11th, because that would be fun. And the curing process has a lot to do with how much moisture is in the air. And the other thing about kefi is it is something that, like, the older it gets, the more nuanced, the deeper the scent, the richer the scent. So, I don't want to sell raw kefi. You could totally burn it when I'm done, but I've tried that. It is a vastly different scent. If it is allowed to have 3 to 6 months to just sort of sit in a dark place and kind of mingle. Other ways to protect yourself from psychic vampires. 1, remove yourself from the room where you think you've been attacked, especially if there's a person in the room. Pro tip, not everything that takes your energy like a vampire is wearing a human body. Plenty of spirits can vampirize your energy. So same thing applies, though. Remove yourself from the room where it feels like you've been attacked. And assess. Does it feel like you're still being drained? Does it still feel like you're being attacked? At which point you need to go to like the next set of protocols, which is a little technique that I repeat so many times. I feel like a broken record. Ground, center, shield. Best bet, nip into a bathroom where you can control the space, close the door, lock yourself in for a little bit, breathe, calm down. And then grounding is simply letting go of anything that is disrupting you. Most of the widespread descriptions of grounding is going to tell you to like literally ground it, like let it flow down into the ground. You don't have to always go down to ground. You can let something like wash out back through your back. You can try to let it go out and down through your hands. You can imagine sending it up into the sky. The point is to release. Release what is bothering you, release what is overwhelming you. Find the way that is most comfortable and most effective for you to get it out. The reason I say nip into a bathroom is it can help to have physical aids, to have things to focus on. So in a bathroom, you can stand in front of the sink and you can turn the taps on and you can put your hands under the water. And that water can be cool so that it is very, very viscerally like there is water running over my hands. And in this water running over my hands, I can feel what I'm releasing wash out of me and wash out of my hands and go down the drain. Think of it as a quick and opportunistic cleansing shower, but you can't stop and take a whole shower, so you just use the water and all of the stuff that it represents for cleansing and release to just literally release that down the drain. So think of grounding as release. Think of centering as balance. Now that you've let go of all this stuff, you need to find your center. You need to find your point of balance. You need to get a firm foundation again. Different traditions and different people will have a different sense of where their center is. Your center may be here, and your center may be here, and it may be down here, and it may be none of those places. The purpose is release, and then find your center, that sheltered place, that still point that feels like the core of you. And give yourself a few moments to cocoon in that, to get a clear sense of where your boundaries are and where you are, and just be as tight in yourself and as safe and as comfortable in yourself as you can be, given the time constraints and wherever you are location-wise. It helps to breathe while you're doing this, to be aware of your breath, to allow your breath to help center you also in your body, in the very act of being alive, of being present. Breaths that you can feel, breaths that help balance you, breaths that help calm and still you. And then your third thing is shielding. Think of that as setting up a boundary. Most common descriptions of shielding you'll find is visualize yourself surrounded by a ball of white light. Doesn't have to be white light, doesn't have to be light. Does help for it to be something that covers you top, bottom, front, back, all the way around. Think of it as your personal bubble. You don't want to extend it too far. Basically, like wherever is comfortably, literally your personal bubble, usually no farther than the extension of your arm. Different people have a different sense of their personal space, but you are affirming the boundary of this is where my space begins, and nothing that I don't allow, nothing is allowed past this unless I welcome it, unless I invite it. Here is a boundary. You can imagine that boundary to be brick, steel, fire, anything that appeals to you and helps affirm the sense that this is a line that others, whether those others are people or spirits or energy or places, nothing crosses that you are not willing to allow in. And spend a little time with a good sense of this is me and this is my space and this is the boundary around me. And I have a right to that boundary. I have a right to say no. I have a right to say no farther than this. I have a right to not be a victim. I have a right, and I have the power, and I have the strength. And if you are still scared, if you still feel overwhelmed, then do not hesitate to ask for assistance in holding that boundary. If you are someone who works with gods and goddesses, divinities, higher powers, say a little prayer, ask for help in holding that boundary and maintaining it, especially when you go back out into wherever you felt like you were attacked. If you work with spirits guides or spirit allies or any of the dead and disembodied, asking one or more of your buddies on that side to help hold that boundary and protect you, totally okay. Actually, it's one of the best uses of any of the spirit allies that you might work with. If you've got a disembodied buddy who hangs around with you, who better to watch your back than somebody who's already on that side, so that you can focus on the business of being here and present in the physical world, and your spirit ally, your friend, can help watch your back and catch things before they become a problem, or give you a little heads up if there's some more attention you need to make to shielding. So grounding is release, centering as finding your balance, and shielding is setting a boundary. And that is how you set up protections for anything, vampires or otherwise. I'm going to stir for a bit, get into the interesting part. It's starting to actually like boil down. How long must I stir this pot? How long? I'm off key because I don't want YouTube to shut me down. No, not that off key. I know you can sing.
It's a different song.
Okay. This is my song, my very own song. I can sing it short and I can sing it long. That one's old enough that I know it's not copyrighted.
Phew, I was getting worried.
It's the Ballad of Tom Thumb. I had it on an old 76 LP. The funny thing is if I sang my own music, I'd actually have to fight with YouTube
Yeah.
for copyright because they would take me down.
So just change a few
Nope,
words.
doesn't quite work.
Change the key.
Well, it's because there's an algorithm that recognizes music, and it's an automatic thing. They're just like, oh, nope, you can't do that. Because
That's
they're
a good point. Parody is protected.
Mm.
So if you change enough words, maybe.
maybe. Well, that's useful because we filk shit all the goddamn time.
Oh, yes, we do. It is the best way. For whenever you are ready.
Mhm.
Do you have any recommendations for people you would put in touch with someone who has bad energy attached and wants to get it cleared?
Mm.
Like
Oh,
energy worker recommendations.
let's see. Oni. So if you're looking for someone to do a spirit reading for you, top of my list is a lovely woman who lives in Norway by the name of Heideke Dalton. And she is my top ranked list for spirit communication. I not only trust her, but she is amazing and phenomenal. Our friend Oni, who runs integrative, wait, our friend Oni, who runs integrative empowerment, is an energy worker and also someone with a therapist and counselor background. So she is particularly suited to not only remove attachments, but also offer the support for releasing trauma and dealing with the trauma that results from that. Because I know a lot of folks who deal with like psychic attack and spirit attack uh, hesitate to then seek out like a counselor or a therapist because they're so used to being told that it's all in their head and that their attack is just mental illness. But I caution everybody to consider the amount of trauma and psychological damage that is done by enduring that. You want to heal both. You want ideally someone who can do or a team of someone who can address the energetic side, and then somebody who can help you process that trauma. So Oni's a great one. Kathy Santori is a great Reiki practitioner who does a lot of long distance healing. Who else is all out? I mean, there's so many people out there at this point. I think we were starting to put together like a little list.
Not for exactly this question. But
Yeah.
Looking for an energy worker to do something.
Yeah. We're mostly like readers and okay.
And the list that we put together was specifically for counseling.
Yeah.
That was friendly to alternative.
Let's see. I know Kathy for sure does long distance release and Reiki healing and things and removes attachments. And I think that would fall under Oni's wheelhouse. If you wanted a fantastic energy body drawing of what the attachment had done to your energy body, Catherine Mason Rogers is a great person to go to. Griffin Manderkin also. I mean, Griff has the ability to remove. I'm just not sure that he's in the right headspace right now. Was working in the medical industry and is just dealing with having been someone in healthcare during the age of COVID. It's, Who else do we have? There's so many cool people. Pretty much anybody on Oni's roster is somebody that I'd recommend.
I mean, the tricky thing with many of them is that they can only serve people in Michigan.
Okay.
Because therapists and the laws haven't caught up to.
Yeah, to the fact that we're, not the fact that we are actually a post-geographic society. Like it's not about geography anymore. Oh, I mean, Christopher Penzak and anybody at the Temple of Witchcraft would be good at it too.
Yeah, for
as I'm thinking about it. Devon Hunter. I mean, there's a bunch. If you're okay with working with witches, there's a whole host of folks who are fantastic and actually like tread the line between psychic energy worker and witch. So Devon Hunter, Christopher Penzak.
I'm gonna put together an actual list.
Yeah.
After checking to make sure that, like you, they're not someone who doesn't do that because they're not comfortable with it.
I know for sure that Devon has a whole practice. Like Devon does all his services. And if Christopher doesn't do it himself directly, he certainly will know people who do and have people that he's personally taught. Christopher's sort of in the same boat that I'm in, where it's like semi-retirement from that. I mean, like there's ethical issues that I have, but there's also there's only so much time in a day. And at this point, my time is better spent teaching other people how to do it so that there's more people to do it. Thicken up, dang you. For those who are new to the stream, because I'm sure there are a few, what am I doing? I am on the final day of creation of an ancient temple incense known as kefi or kapet. It is a multiple day process of adding an ingredient or two a day and letting it sit and rest and sort of stew in this kefi mash. And on the final day, you add frankincense that has been melted in honey, and you add powdered myrrh, and you boil it all down until it is a very thick and stiff batter, and it's not quite there yet. Looks a lot like brownie batter, honestly. And then it has to sit and cure for at least 3 months, between 3 and 6 months, depending on environment and moisture in the air, humidity, stuff like that. And then we hand roll it and dust it in a little bit of benzoin powder or some other similar thing and put it up on my website. It is not a cheap incense. It is a little tricky to burn. It is not an incense that is meant to be put directly on a charcoal. It is not self-lighting. It is an incense that is best burnt in a bakur burner, which is a little electric burner that is set to heat up between about 180 and 210 degrees Fahrenheit. Really fancy ones have like a nice little dial so you can actually choose where the heat goes. There is a really nice one called a lotus burner at Mermaid Magical Arts. I have not found another source for it outside of Alibaba, which is a whole different thing to try to deal with because it's definitely something that is made in Japan. And while they're used pretty extensively throughout Asia, they're rare out here. The one at Mermaid Magical Arts is not cheap. It is about $70, so just be aware of that. Bakur burners, Bakhoor, can be acquired for between $15 and $25. Other options include little tea light burners that have like a little cup either of stone or of brass that is above a tea light, and you heat the incense in that. And in a pinch, you could use a hot plate. Always have something to line whatever you're burning it on, because this is a resin heavy incense and it melts rather than burns. There's not a lot of smoke, and it gets super, super sticky when it's done. What do you use it for? It is something that you burn. Traditionally, it was burned in the evenings in Egyptian temples, and it was part of the religious ceremony. There was incense burned in the morning, at noon, and at night. This particular incense was associated with opening the doors of vision and dream. It has a psychic awakening element to it and an element of inviting communication with the other world, which is one of the reasons I started playing around with making it. It has a lot of costly ingredients, which are pretty difficult to source, especially in the age of COVID. Some of the simple and basic ones: frankincense, myrrh, lemongrass, cinnamon, mint, but ideally Egyptian mint. Spearmint and peppermint are a little too sharp. Cyperus root or galangal, both of which are rhizomes that have a scent to them. There's a possible substitution of tiger nut flower, which I'm going to try in a future batch. It is related to the nut sedge that creates the cyperus stuff, and that is Cyperus, or Cyperus, not Cyprus like the country. It also has gum mastic and, let's see, aspalathos, otherwise known as honeybush. Some batches can include henna and ground wood from sycamore fig, also ground cedar. This particular one has a few variations, including sandalwood, which does not appear in the original recipe, but is my variation for this one specifically. A little bit of something called agar wood or aloes wood, which is really very pricey but fantastic wood-based incense. It's called sinking incense in Japan, jingo, and is a fascinating thing to do a little bit of research on. It was used pretty widely in the ancient world. It's got this rich, complex, sweet, spicy scent. Sometimes it's marketed as oud wood. Cooking my arm. Huh?
Well, I'm trying to share. I'm trying to share that therapist list, but the link to it is huge.
Does tiny URL still exist?
That's where I am right now.
Perfect.
Yay! The thing.
Okay.
I have shared that. I'm going to make it.
This is the point where I get frustrated every time, where I'm like, it's never going to thicken up. This is a little bit like making risotto or hard candy. Like, it's just or fudge, honestly. Like, just a whole lot of low heat, stir it constantly, low heat, stir it constantly, and hours of that, which, hey, thank you for keeping me company while I do this.
So I think the person who asked the question is no longer watching, but I will ask it in case they come back and watch later.
Okay.
Can kefi be associated with the magic of Kemet or Neter?
Oh, yeah. Could kefi be associated with the magic of Kemet or Neter? Absolutely, that's sort of where it comes from. So for folks who don't know what Kemet means the black land, which is to say the land that is colored black by the deep, rich silt from the flooding of the Nile. It's another word for Egypt. Neteru, This is the name of the ancient Egyptian deities. So does this tie in with that magic and those sorts of things? Absolutely, because this was the temple incense used in the Egyptian temples. It is the recipe that appears in the laboratory room at the temple complex at Edfu, and that places it at over 2,000 years old. And other recipes of it are even older, but I use the one as my base from the laboratory room at Edfu because it has the ingredient proportions. Most of the other ones just give you a list of you use this, 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 and this, and a base of wine and fruit, and it doesn't tell you how much incense, how much frankincense to use versus how much cinnamon to use versus how much cypress grass to use. And that's great if grandma like stood over you making this and you know that it's a pinch and this and it's a bunch of that. But if we are separated by 3,000 years and you just tell me that it's frankincense, myrrh, raisins, and wine with some honey and some other stuff, and I try to just like put all that together, there's no guarantee that I'm going to end up with the right thing. So I started with the recipe that's up on the walls at Edfu because even though the quantities in the two recipes that show up at Edfu are enormous, like liters and liters and liters. Like they were clearly recipes geared toward making the incense for like 6 months for heavy use in a temple. And this is like 1/150th of those. Like I played around with like dividing it by 7, dividing it by 9. I was like, oh, that's still too much. So now we are at a point where I've converted it to US kitchen measurements. So it's 3 cups of red wine and 2 cups of honey and a cup and a quarter of frankincense and 3/4 of a cup of myrrh and 3 tablespoons of this and 3 tablespoons of that and like a cup and 2 tablespoons. And it just, so it's a workable recipe that I can just put up on my website and say, if you want to try it, go ahead. There's some specialized tools. It's not a cheap endeavor. It's fun. The one downside is the ingredients cost so much that if you fuck it up, that is a costly mistake. It is best prepared and boiled in an unlined copper pot. It helps with heat convection, and it helps with the way in which something that has this much sugar in it will eventually firm up without crystallizing, which is kind of important. And if you are curious of my very fancy wooden spoon here, it is olive wood. It was hand carved for me by Mrs. Mason, Cat Mason Rogers' mama, who is a fantastic woodcrafter and very, very clever and makes all kinds of cool things, and was kind enough to work out like the ideal stuff here to save my hands for 5 hours of stirring kefi as it gets thicker and thicker and thicker. What does Twitterland tell me?
I mean, if you're checking Twitter, I can ask you more questions.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. World's still on fire.
You have to check Twitter to find that?
No, not really. I'm cyclic, remember?
That's why I'm confused. You must just like doom scrolling.
It's more, I don't know.
I think you do.
I feel like Johnny 5, need input. Yeah, right over your head. I bet you're right over the head of anybody who's younger than me. That's fine. Number 5 alive.
Yep, still over my head.
It's Wall-E, only live action and from the 80s.
Okay.
In fact, Wall-E looks a lot like number 5. It's really cute.
I mean, I love Wally, so you already pretty much have me.
I mean, the premise of it is there's like these little robots that some people are working on, and somebody spills Coca-Cola on their keyboard, and a power surge results, and this one particular one, number 5 of the whole batch, like goes and
Well,
is
plenty
now
of people-
sentient.
Plenty of people in the chat know exactly what you're talking
Yes.
about and are loving it.
Yeah, it's cute. It's super cute.
Good.
Sort of like a little bit after the era of E.T., but sort of the same sort of like charming vibe. He falls in love with somebody. It's just super, super adorable.
So, another question from a while back.
Yeah.
The vampire conversation. What's the impact of the game Vampire the Masquerade on the vampire community?
Oh, okay. What was the impact of the game Vampire the Masquerade on the vampire community? It was an interesting reciprocal relationship. So, would the game Vampire the Masquerade exist without the vampire community, or would the vampire community exist without the game? So neither of the things, certainly not the vampire community as it exists, and Vampire the Masquerade, neither of them would exist probably without Anne Rice. And that's not to say that there wasn't a community of self-identified vampires that existed before that, but the vampire community as we understand it, with its court system and its hierarchies, and just sort of like a lot of the politics and sort of the way that it came together in the 90s and the 2000s, that was absolutely influenced by the theater of vampires as portrayed in Anne Rice, and taking vampires from necessarily being the bad guys. Like prior to, actually prior to Dark Shadows, you couldn't really have a vampire character in a movie or a book and have them also be a good guy or be at least a Byronic hero, a dark hero. There wasn't humanity. It was always a struggle. The vampire was the monster, the other who must be conquered, the other who must be overcome, who was a threat. And that's, definitely Christopher Lee's Dracula. That's definitely Bela Lugosi's Dracula. We could deconstruct them and look at what are they telling us about, especially Victorian English attitudes toward folks from different countries or folks of different like ethnic and racial extraction. And there's definitely some of that going on. But what I can tell you is Dark Shadows, with the character of Barnabas Collins, the hot mess that Dark Shadows is anyway, normalized the idea of a vampire who was struggling for their humanity. And that inspired a whole generation of other creators and writers, including Anne Rice. And Anne Rice took it a step further and made the vampire a rock star, made the vampires these artistic, very thinly coated gay people. like I'll be honest, when I was reading Interview with a Vampire in I think my senior year of high school, I'm sitting there going, do I need to go to confession? I think this is gay porn. I'm not sure.
Oh,
I can't.
no.
Yeah, pretty sure that's gay porn.
You had a very different high school experience.
Yes, I did. Ohio, Midwest, raised Catholic, very sheltered.
Also, confession.
Well, yeah,
Jews don't have that.
Jews don't have confession. Catholics have
Don't
confession.
assume anything is evil.
Yeah, no, you had to come up every week. Every week was something that you went and said, "Bless me, Father, for I have sinned. I did this week." And like it's this weird thing where you like feel compelled to have something that you did to be forgiven for. And I don't think that that's the purpose, and that's probably not the intent, but it's often the result. Anyhow, that's a whole nother conversation. So what was the impact of Vampire the Masquerade on the thing? So So this role playing game comes together in the late actually the late 18. Wow,
Oh boy.
sorry, I'm thinking 1989 is I think when they started working on it. 1990. It makes its debut in the fall of 1991, which coincidentally is when I went to college. So that's my freshman year. Uh, what it did for the vampire community was it created a social structure in person where people could talk about and adopt the identity of the vampire without negative repercussions, without being looked at as just wacky. Um, from the perspective of 2020, where identity is a significant part of conversation, where we recognize that a person can, to some extent, define their own identity. The idea that there was a need to create a safe space to even begin that conversation, it's hard to kind of turn your brain back to that. But in 1990, and certainly before that, you didn't feel like you could even change your name. Like even a nickname was a little presumptuous. Like life was very dictated, and identity especially. So exploring an identity as a witch or a magical practitioner or heaven forfend a vampire, which was not accepted by the witches, the psychics, or anything. I remember those conversations. 1990 something in college. I'm with like all of the weird folk who are like the magical occult folk, and there's this, the one person who's like, "Well, I'm a witch," and there's another like proto other kid who's like, "Well, I'm an elf," and they're like, "What are you, Michelle?" And I'm like, "I think I'm a vampire," and they're like, "Those don't exist. That's really weird." And off they go, being elves and witches and not seeing the conflict. So, in this cultural milieu of like just starting to push the boundaries to like dare to explore something different, now there's a role playing game. And in the same way that Dungeons and Dragons uh, did not turn a bunch of people into devil worshipping occultists, but gave people the opportunity to explore the possibility of magic, gave people the opportunity to explore themselves as a wizard, as a magic user, as a sorcerer, to consider that maybe this is something that they would want to be, and maybe take portions of characters and fantasy and see where that was allowing them to express something that was in them all along. Same thing for the Vampire the Masquerade, especially once it turned into live action. The thing that really changed for everyone, because I mean, there's some society, there's some social stuff happening when you are gaming around a table, but not to the extent you have now, where it's all Twitch streamed and whatnot, where people can kind of participate as a sport almost. Like this is now a spectator engagement. But live action meant that we now had a place where we physically socialized. We engaged with one another face to face. And we were gaming, certainly. I would say 99% of the people playing were very sure and very clear that these are characters, that this is role play, that this, as much as a character you're playing is taking pieces of yourself, it's still fantasy. But you're doing it with other people, and it allows you to have dialogue, it allows you to explore possibilities, it allows you to ask what if. And the very power of asking what if, of being able to say, you know what, tonight I am going to be the vampire, Toreador vampire, Helena Radenthal. And while I know that in creating this character, I'm absolutely like putting in a couple of bits of my actual personality that I don't feel comfortable or safe embodying right now in like regular society and regular world within the context of a game, it's okay. It's safe for me to like let this out. And that was the key. Having a place where it was safe to explore aspects of who we were that we didn't feel safe. We didn't feel like we had permission to explore anywhere else. That in some cases we were actively being told we couldn't. In some cases, we were being kicked out of our houses. In some cases, we were being actively exercised. Not like rah, 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 Jane Fonda workout, but, Pentecostal family members holding you down and beating you with a Bible because you wear black clothes. So, in this very repressive milieu, now we've got this outlet, and it's okay because it's make believe. It's okay because we're just playing dress up, only some of us aren't. And when we would stop playing the game where the vampire community really happened, where what we know as the vampire community flourished and grew between the cracks, were the late night conversations at Denny's or IHOP after the vampire LARP, after the game stopped. You got to go, hey, where'd you get that character idea? Hey, that scene that you did was really, really cool. Hey, this little thing is really interesting to me. And you've got like this little symbol on the jacket that you're wearing. Is that only for your character? It allowed us to have common language. It allowed us to start conversations that if you'd passed someone on the street at that time and they had, even if they had like a pink triangle or a pride flag, there was a lot of social pressure to just keep moving and not ask and not be impolite and like, what do you do? And more so if those symbols were magical, if there was anything metaphysical or occult about it. Again, especially because of the Satanic Panic, and also because you were never 100% sure if somebody was wearing, the Star of Baphomet because they were super into Slayer, or was there something else? So now you've got this container, this socially accepted group where you can ask the questions and you can feel comfortable sharing, and you can feel that you're not going to be judged because you're dressing up playing vampire every fucking night. Like, you're not going to get judged. And the thing is in New York particularly, and I've got the receipts, guys. I have got the advertisement in Realms of Fantasy magazine that advertises Endless Night from 1998 as a weekend-long vampire LARP. So there's a crisscross there. There was definitely a community. There were definitely real vampires who were also playing games, and who knew that there was a difference, but who enjoyed having a place where they could dress up, where they could let it all hang out, where they didn't have to feel that they had to hide, and where they could figure out, like, who can we have a safe conversation with? Who's also into this? It was like coding a lot of stuff. And for many years, it really frustrated me that the real vampire community just refused to acknowledge that there was any overlap there at all. And on the other side, the role players just wanted to like shove the real vampires off into a little corner and just deny it entirely. And fascinatingly, now we're at this cool place where like a lot of those boundaries and a lot of those lines that were artificial to begin with have started to like really blur and break down. And folks recognize that it's totally okay and even healthy to play, to engage in creative outlets and storytelling and make believe, and that sometimes stories hold more truth, that none of them is fact, and yet they are true nevertheless. I was just having a conversation to that effect with the creator of Hookland. If you don't know what Hookland is, pop around, do a quick search, Hookland. It is a creative conglomerate of, I don't know how to describe it. It's make believe. It's an England that never was. It's the truth remembered differently, and it involves magic and mystery and horror, and is a fascinating way of expressing things that are real and true, but maybe not fact. Plays with the edges of myth and folklore. And to me, that's those edges, that liminal space between lived experience and myth, folklore, and story, is where the overlap between Vampire the Masquerade and the vampire community lives, and where it grows, the fertile soil from which it stems. I gotta stir this stuff.
3-stir stir. You were asking a while ago, how long does the whole process take to make kefi?
For this batch, since I tried to go by the book and do a single ingredient a day, I started on October 31st, and I added the final ingredients today, so that's the 11th, so what, 12 days? And then however many hours it will take to boil this down to a consistency that is workable, and then another 3 months minimum as it cures. So, 3.5 months. If I were doing it like fully traditionally, the way that the classical writers report this process is there was an ingredient, a single ingredient added every day, and it was prepared, and there were hymns and there were prayers, and there was like a whole ceremony that surrounded the grinding, the preparation, and the addition of this particular stuff. So it was a magical act. It was reconstituting the body of Osiris, and that's a significant part, especially at the Ptolemaic time period, and also why peker, one of the debated ingredients, why I lean so heavily toward it being something related to the sycamore fig, because coffins were made out of the wood of the sycamore fig. It was sacred to Osiris. It was significant to the whole Osiris myth. And at that point, Kyphi was making this incense was a symbolic act of putting back together the body of Osiris, which, if you're familiar with ancient Egyptian mythology, Osiris and Set were brothers. There was some bad blood between them. Set ends up tricking Osiris into a box, killing him, and cutting his body up into a bunch of pieces so he can't be put back together easily, and scattering him all around Egypt. And his wife, Osiris's wife, Osiris, goes all up and down the Nile and everywhere trying to find all of the pieces to put them all back together to make her husband live again in the other world. She mummifies him. One piece cannot be found. It's pretty significant. Osiris's dick is eaten by a fish, and so Isis has to make a fake one. And nevertheless, she puts them all back together again and conceives Horus from her husband's dead body. She transforms herself into the shape of a kite, which is a type of carrion bird. Sorry, not carrion bird, raptor. Yeah, as a kite, she hovers over the corpse of her husband and conceives Horus. And mythology, yo. It's I used to okay, I have got a really quick. It's the original dead fuck. But
Oh, you. Yes, somebody just angrily reacted.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I saw that show up. I see you. I am with you.
I'm sorry, the dad jokes are bad. And no offense to Isis or Osiris. Like I am an equally opportunistic blasphemer.
Thank goodness for that. So bad.
It's terrible.
My goodness.
Sorry, guys. Anyway, so Kyphi is about reconstituting the body of Osiris. So in some respects, although, I think one of these just went dead, I think.
This may be the longest they've ever been.
Yeah.
Used.
Can you guys still hear me?
They'll speak up if they
okay.
can't, I hope.
We'll see.
Fingers crossed. I mean, I can turn my computer
yeah.
on.
Well, I mean, once I take it out, there's still a thing in there. But yeah, I think only one of them went away.
Yes, we are still audible.
Okay, good.
That's a legitimate question. Is it still necrophilia if the intent is to make the dead body alive? Oh, good. We got there!
There's a whole bunch of stuff about rights of kingship and succession and whatnot. Before the earphone went dead, I was gonna say that. What was I gonna say? Fuck. Oh, okay. Hello to the Sahaja.
And I've got another question for you.
Cool.
Following hot on the heels of the conversation about Osiris,
And necrophilia,
do
yeah.
you work with Kemetic deities in your own personal practice? And if so, what's that relationship like?
Okay. I'm a little complicated because I'm more non-theistic in the sense that I recognize that deities exist. I am totally on board for people who work with them, and I don't quite have a right-hand path relationship with deities. I will say, as Kemetic deities go, Set is the one that I resonate with most profoundly. And specifically not Set of the Hellenic world once he has become wound up as Set Typhon. There's a really weird thing that happens with Set's mythology where he kind of becomes identified with the thing that he used to be, like the one guy who could fight. Like he used to be the guy who would fight serpent Apophis, Apep, and later in Hellenic Egypt, he is equated with Typhon, which is sort of the Greek equivalent of Apophis or Apep. Set at that point gets really complicated and weird. Really, really old, like Old Kingdom Set, who is twin of Horus as opposed to his creepy pederastic uncle, who is seen as like the equal and opposite, like dynamic force for the Hebsed ceremony. Set, the god of boundaries, Set, great of strength, like that Set, that part of the myth, that's what like speaks to me. Um, Isis, not so much, and Osiris, not so much. And there's the only ones that like really kind of leap out at me are Bestet and Sekhmet. And maybe Taweret, but that's complicated mainly because of her relationship with Set. But yeah, I'm team Set. And what is that relationship like? For me, it's more any of the deities that I connect with. For me, they are more. They're not things that I pray to. They are not beings that I ask for favors. In my system and by my belief system, I am responsible for doing all of my stuff. Like I am expected to be responsible. So I don't get to pray things away or ask for help. I've got to do it because of choices that I made. And um, for me, then there are qualities I aspire to or seek to integrate in my own expression of self. And that is my relationship with individual gods and goddesses. Another one that speaks and that has always spoken to me that really stands out is Shiva Nataraja, the various iterations of Shiva, who is in the Hindu pantheon, the god of destruction, sort of, creation and destruction. And Shiva Nataraja is a fairly common image. And then I seized on it, especially because there was a beautiful icon of Shiva as the dancer in the Cleveland Museum of Art. And it's this enormous statue, and there's a ring of fire. And Shiva has, four arms and these dreadlocks, and the moon and the Ganges in his hair, and he's beating the drum of time in one hand, and he's got the "Be Not Afraid" symbol in the other, and another hand is like pointing down, and there's like all of this rich imagery. One foot is down and one foot is in motion, and the icon is an expression of creation and destruction and the dynamism of that force. And the other thing that always appealed to me is there is a form of Shiva that is both male and female. And as somebody who's intersex and was, coming of age as a magical and mystical practitioner, finding something, anything, anyone that looked like me, that was not this nor that, but both, and was revered for being able to embody all of those sides and all of those energies, that was rare. So Shiva Nataraja is another one. I'm starting to get there.
Oh yeah? Should I get that?
Yeah, because it does happen pretty quick at this point.
All right.
Which is good, because I don't know how long this other little head will last.
All right. I will be right back.
Okay. Oh, this is so much nicer to do when it's cooler out. It's not fun to do it in summer. I was regretting my decisions back in June, but I really wanted to catch that lunar eclipse. There's no established reason or association with creating kefi at certain cycles of the moon or the sun or anything. Purely a thing that I've started to do just for my own practice, and also to like mark when I start the batch. So, there's one that was done during the supermoon, and I started making it then. And the lunar eclipse one, obviously, I started on the night of the lunar eclipse. And this one, I started on the blue moon and also Samhain. So, and mostly just because of personal associations. UPG, unverifiable personal gnosis. Useful when we are, trying to find ways to sort of cobble our paths together, following our nose. Whoops, that was a big thump.
Well, I almost just destroyed the refrigerator is all.
Oh, okay.
I left a dent.
In the fridge?
Yeah.
Ooh. Okay, cool. Cool. Cool.
Maybe too strong.
Okay, I'm gonna grab this.
Here's a fun question.
Yeah.
How do you feel about people new to practicing and the concept of closed practices?
Oh, complicated. So if my presence on the internet is any indication, I believe that information should be free and available and out there. And first, those attitudes definitely came out of being a practitioner in the late 80s and early 90s and having so many doors closed, and like looking around. And I was a poor kid. Like the only reason I even got to college was I was on a full ride scholarship. So when any of the groups that are out there are like for $19.95 when $20 is too much, especially in like the 80s. But there was gatekeeping. Like you couldn't get any information unless you paid the money, and then there was a couple of just straight up pyramid schemes. Looking at a couple of them in particular, I rebelled. I got really angry, and I rebelled by putting as much information out as freely as possible on the internet. Just no boundaries, no price, no anything. No cost to join. Even publishing books was a little difficult for me to want to justify, because a book is $20. And there was a point in my own practice where $20 was too much. So in the case of the Codex, I worked with the folks at Sacred Texts, and I donated in perpetuity for forever. Sacred Texts will always have a copy of the early Vampire Codex and a copy of the early Vampire Ritual book, so that if you can't afford it, you don't have to pirate it. It's right there. Now that said, I have mixed feelings about closed systems, because as a practitioner, there is a point where there is some stuff that I don't know if I would say that it must be secret, but it is private. I can speak for my group House Keperu, where we have a fairly complicated shared past life narrative. And one of the only ways to measure or verify if someone is genuinely tapping into that and is actually like experiencing it is to have some of it be secret, is have some of it not be where they could just randomly stumble on it and then, either be front loaded. And in that case, they're not even trying to mislead. They're simply they've read it and now starting to read into or make their own stuff fit it. Or, and to be honest, I have learned in the past 30 years, not everybody who tries to join a group is doing so for the right reasons. Sometimes people really just want to feel special, and sometimes people join things because they're fucking assholes and they think they can come in and try to like take over, or honestly, they're using it as a dating club, and that's just reprehensible. And anyway, so some things need to be private. There is a need for mystery. Uh, I wouldn't have agreed with that when I was 20. I would have screamed, shouted, and shaken my fist at the heavens. And I think this is one of the only times where getting older means you get a little more conservative in your views is true. Uh, Time and experience has taught me why some things do have, if not hard gates, at least some work that people need to go through in order to prove that they are serious about it, in order to weed out the ones who ruin it for everybody else because they're there to just fuck around. Um, I still believe that a lot of stuff should be free and a lot of stuff should be out there where anybody can get it. I don't believe in gatekeeping knowledge for fear that somebody's going to use it for evil. I don't think knowledge and information by itself is evil. It's like knives and guns and hammers. It's how a person uses it. But when it comes to organizations, when it comes to magical societies and magical communities, I think the most important thing to understand is they are communities first, which means as a group of people, they have a right to protect themselves. They have a right to their barriers and their boundaries, to have a selection process of who they're comfortable with, and rules in place that do their absolute best to prevent people from taking advantage of the society, the community, and the people who have sought it as their safe place of practice and expression. Now, that said, I have a very dim view of all of the things out there that will tell you that we and we alone have the great truth, and you must go through 5 different initiations, each of which cost from $500 to $10,000, and it costs that much because our wisdom is truly that revelatory, and there is no one else in the world who knows these things. And that's a lot of bullshit. I'm sorry. Anybody who tells you that they've got the truth and the only way to get the truth is to jump through their hoops is actually just trying to sell you something. If instead you've got a group or a community that tells you that they have rules, that they have applications, that they have a review process, and they explain to you why, more so than just, well, we're so cool that you couldn't possibly ever find anyone else as awesome as we are. Like, there's a lot of places out there that are going to tell you that they have the one truth, or they can save you, or everything else is demonic and only they can remove your demonic attachments. And they might not call them demons, they might call them 15 different things, but clearly there's bad stuff and only they can fix it and only they can protect you. And by the way, here's a cost. That's what you want to run away from. Nothing good comes from that. Oh, but as an iconoclast and as a rebel And everything else, I have to admit, if you have a group, if you have a community, um, there has to be some structure and order, and there's no way to protect everybody without it. And it's just a matter of how conscious and how conscientious about how that serves everyone and how that's meant to serve the membership and not simply the people in charge.
This makes sense to me.
Oh, it's starting to get really thick.
Fine.
Finally. Didn't want to be here till 11. Starting to look like it.
You always think that about it.
There's a point where I'm just like, oh my God, is this ever gonna happen?
How much longer do you think until they put it on the chat thing?
No more than 30 minutes.
That might be a good time. Like before we transfer, it might be a good
Yeah.
time to end the live stream because neither of us will be able to look at the screen for
Yeah.
any length.
Yeah, because this thing is very, very hot and very tricky to play with. So. Oh, and I have a neat little thing that I got to help us so we don't burn our hands.
Oh, goody.
So we can just like,
A rolling pin.
yeah.
Yeah.
Rolling pin of, yep. I have bought more fancy ass kitchen shit for making kefi.
It's been long enough that people are wondering what's in the pot.
Ah, what's in the pot? What's in the pot? What is in the pot is ancient temple incense, the recipe of which appears on the walls of the laboratory room at the Temple of Edfu in Egypt. It is, in that recipe, over 2,000 years old, and there are versions and recipes of it that make this, up to 3,500 years old. It is a weird way of making incense that we have lost largely, at least in the European descended world. And it makes, it starts with a base of fruit, dried fruit, wine, and honey, and is very heavy on the resins and the precious woods. You add ideally, you add a single ingredient a day over a period of days between 10 and 18. Different variations of kefi can have up to 18 individual ingredients. This one was made from October 31st until today. A couple of days I added 2 ingredients because I had to work around a filming schedule. And this batch, each of my batches are slightly different. Artisanal, funky incense. And this one is called Phoenix. And the intention that I've been making it with is rising from the ashes. It has to cure once it is boiled down, and so this particular incense will not be available in little hand-rolled balls until probably the end of January, beginning of February at the earliest. But there are other variations, other vintages of kefi on my site, so you can check out some Silver Mirror or some Lunar Eclipse. Be aware it is pricey. It is not a cheap thing to make. It is very labor intensive, and a lot of the things that go into it are pretty rare. I have bought more things from Europe and the Middle East in the past couple of months. Actually, well, past year at this point. And I'm sure I'm on lists. And we have lost both of the little headphone things. Where did I put the... Hang on a second, guys. No, I just need to...
Hi everybody. We don't need it. We have sound over here.
Okay, cool.
But yeah, there we go. All right.
No, I'm
Cool.
I'm looking for where did I don't want to walk around with these stupid things just like hanging out in my ears. Where did I put the things that
Let me find them, because they
It
were
was
here a
just
second
right
ago.
there.
They can't have gone far, can they?
Well, oh.
Yeah, they didn't go far.
Okay.
I'm so helpful.
Yeah.
There you go.
There we go. Okay.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, if I have a complaint about these little things, they do not stay charged as long as I would like.
So what we're going to do, I'm going to add me. Oh, poo, I'm always on that side. And there's an echo.
There is an echo.
So how's that? That should now be just a single. Can folks still hear us okay? We have found the problem with those headphones.
They do not last for a full Kyphi boil.
Yep.
Yep, we're getting to the point where
Cool.
I'm very
gosh.
happy for the nicely sanded and rounded handle of this particular spatula.
Good deal. Excellent.
Oh, so I know that Kat's mom wanted the full array out to see like, what's useful.
I'll take pictures too.
Yeah, because she's still like theory crafting like what are like she made this one for scraping the pot.
Oh, that's perfect.
Yeah, no, they're pretty awesome. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I mean the Kyphi's gonna go there at some point.
Well, yeah, soon.
You know, this tiny little one and more of a spoon, and that one. She wanted to see if like this was gonna be like a better one for that, but like it's a little too square.
Gotcha.
And this one worked wonderfully. So
Perfect.
and then we got this guy over here, which was really
He's
good.
covered in kefi.
Covered in kefi and molten frankincense and honey.
Mm-hmm. Sounds delicious. Aha!
What?
People say the sound quality is better than it was before.
Oh, really?
So never again do we need to worry about those little earphones and you repeating all the questions I ask you.
Fuck. Okay. Well, that's good. That's good.
Yay!
That's good to know.
I like it. Haha.
So the reason I started using the headphones with this was I had every expectation that the sound on this one would have been better.
Uh-huh.
And the first time I used it, everybody was like, I can't hear you. I can't hear you. And I was just like, I don't know why it's being stupid.
Huh.
But if the sound feels better now, that's great.
Yeah, that's so much easier. Woohoo! Some welder gloves have been suggested as a possible kefi accoutrement.
Yeah, I can see that. This thing is going to be really tricky to grab onto.
Yeah, that's right. The other really good thing about not wearing those headphones is now I have a voice too.
Yay!
We can have conversations. Yeah, no. Either Ghosts or the Zosh Electronics Aura seems like a good bet for why that wasn't working. And now things have balanced out. I'm here. It's okay. Oh, good.
I kind of didn't drink most of my tea. I may end up asking for another cup at some point.
You didn't drink your tea.
It got cold.
Oh dear.
I'm
Did you suck the heat out of it again?
No, I was talking most of the time.
Oh.
I mean, I sipped on it. It's about halfway gone.
Well, you can have as much tea as you want because I'm not good at saying no to someone who wants decaf tea.
Whew.
Goodness. Question, have you ever made black salt?
No, I have not made black salt. I'm trying to remember. Is that salt with volcanic glass? Or I don't remember how to make that. I have seen somebody talk about it, and I have not tried to do it, and I cannot remember the recipe for making it. I will say that like black salt was something new to me. And we just used to use like a little pile of salt a little bowl of it, was used both by energy workers, Reiki practitioners, and some witches in the 90s and early 2000s as basically like an energy dump when you were like clearing energy. There's a point with this thing that I always kind of want to go Kwai Chang Kane and like, even though I know that that's just a terrible idea.
There was a question earlier that I didn't quite get to.
Okay.
And a similar question has now been asked.
Okay.
Broadly, they're both questions about empaths.
Okay.
In one case, it's someone was asking about like, how do I make sure I don't get overwhelmed as an empath? And the question now is, how do I help my daughter, who's 15, manage her empathy?
Develop good emotional boundaries, not just for psychic stuff, but, and I can't emphasize this enough, how do you develop good emotional boundaries? Start to learn to say no. Like, be able to say no to people, to situations, to anything that makes you uncomfortable. Be able to set a boundary. And if you can do that in your regular life and in your emotional life, that ability extends to your psychic stuff. So the best thing that you can do for your 15-year-old daughter is to help her develop healthy emotional boundaries. Those will shore her up as an empath more than anything else. A good sense of like where she ends and where her needs end and where her friends' needs begin, and where like what you're feeling ends and where she begins. Like just a good sense of where she is, what her inner space is. You have to know it before you can affirm it and before you can protect it. So.
Mm-hmm.
And I will also say that if you are empathic, it is a good idea to get a strong sense of those boundaries and work out how your empathy can be like circumscribed before you try to get into a relationship. An empath in a relationship unconsciously, unintentionally tries to do whatever their partner wants or needs because they feel what the partner is feeling as if it's their own feeling. And it can unfortunately lead to some incredibly codependent, toxic relationships. And especially if the partner is even like a little bit abusive, it becomes very difficult for an empath to see it as such and to ever extricate themselves from that. So you want those boundaries, you want that good, healthy ability to say no, ability to say, this is my shit, this is your shit. You want that long before you get into a relationship.
Mm-hmm.
I speak from experience. Painful experience.
So this may be a more complicated question.
Uh-huh.
What metaphysical purpose does kefi have?
Kyphi is fantastic for opening the doors to vision, dream, and the realm of spirits. It facilitates spirit communication. It helps to heighten the energy of the person or persons who are smelling it and the space in which it is burned. So it also makes it a richer energetic environment for spirits and other things to reach out, connect, and interact with us in a sensible, perceptible way. And different batches that I make are also tuned towards certain specific purposes. The lunar eclipse is for protection during the dark hours, and this one is for Phoenix, rising from the ashes. So healing, renewal, rebirth. You know, there's something really potent in our system for this one coming to fruition for,
for the
our Night of Shades.
Yeah.
Because as much as that is a celebration of the disembodied, it is also when they will let us know if they plan to be reborn.
Oh, how's it going over there?
Just about right.
Yeah, it looks like it's really getting
I wanna actually like err on the side of like a little stickier than I just so I'm really curious to like get something that cures as hard as the one that the Jin one sent. And I think my impatience has played a role in some of my gooier kefi. Because I hit a point where I'm just like, I just want to be done.
It is a long process. And quite the arm workout, yes. Definitely.
Oh, it's a good thing I'm a swimmer.
Slaving over a hot stove.
I'm actually gonna close this. It feels like it's done its job. Now it's see if it cats again.
Well, I don't know. I think Remy finally fucked off.
He did. I chased him away enough times.
Bliss gave up on having a lap available to her.
The Kyphi has stolen her lap.
She'll have lap tomorrow, or she can sleep like on my hand again in bed like she started to.
She's so cute.
She is. Oh, by the way, here's some cocoa.
Oh.
Put the tail into my cocoa.
Oh, it's funny. I was just looking at that. I was wondering if there was any cocoa left in your cocoa.
Maybe psychic. I don't know.
Yum. Oh, a good question.
What?
Do you have any new classes coming up? Because we do have one.
Yeah, there's a past life class coming up.
And with that one, so in order to keep the class size more manageable, to make sure that we have a chance of getting to everybody's questions, we're only offering it to patrons.
Yeah, so I am doing a past life regression later on this month. And what Illyria said, we're trying to figure out like what's the best way, because I haven't done a regression over streaming before, not like this. And so we're keeping it to only patrons of my Patreon. That's patreon.com/haunted. And there's lots of cool stuff you get as a patron, and there's lots of different like levels to be at that open a lot of things up. I'm not a big fan of gatekeeping just based on your financial status. But Illyria can tell you some more about that.
Oh,
I've
my
got
face on the screen.
I've got a lot of requests to do guided meditations and whatnot, so those are kind of going to become my one-off classes. So yeah, now you can.
Well, so the neat thing about the Patreon, I think we have 6 different levels, ranging from $1 a month to $50 a month.
50, which was like I capped it at 25, and people were like, "We want to pay you $50 a month," and I'm like,
well,
okay.
and also people were asking about like, you know, instead of only getting access to classes like after they had streamed, people wanted something where you would just get access to like literally everything that Michelle ever streams live as it happens. And we hadn't been able to do that for a long time, but with recent technological advances and also us finding out about them, we were able to add that like
thanks,
get
Greg and
access
Dana.
to- yeah.
StreamYard is awesome.
seriously like get access to everything live that we do ever. So I think with this one, if you join as a 25 a month or a 50 a month patron, the class is included, I want to say. And if you join at any of the levels from like $1 a month to $15 a month, there's an extra cost for it, but I think the class itself is only $15. And I haven't looked recently because we've been crazy going all over the place. Everything is happening right now. I actually meant to post this several days ago, so thank you for the question. You've reminded me that I never did that. But yeah, the past life regression is going to be on Friday, November 20th. I believe it's from 5:30 p.m. to 7 p.m. And that time was selected with the help of existing patrons so that as many of them as possible could be there live and get their questions answered. Hooray! That said, we are like, if you join as a patron now, you'll still get access to that class. It's not like you had to have already joined by X date or whatever.
And I'm totally okay if like you join to get something and you fuck right off. That's cool.
Yeah.
Because it's the age of COVID. If you don't have the money at the end of the month, that's okay.
Yeah. And if you need to drop down to any level, like you do what you need. We will be here. And you know, I certainly think there's like a great value to even like staying in the community so that you can keep on chatting with people and like seeing the cool new stuff that we really like sharing with you guys. It's really fun. At least it's fun for me.
No, I have fun. We've got a Discord community and people hang out. A lot of supportive stuff.
Yeah, most of the names of folks that I recognize on the chat here are also familiar names from that Discord because we chat like daily. It's pretty great. Especially in the time of COVID when I am starved for people and considering like going to Starbucks drive-thrus just so I can say hello to the baristas because I miss them. I used to work with them and now I don't because COVID. But yeah, it's going to be an awesome past life regression because, I mean, obviously everything Michelle does is awesome. Right? That's
biased.
Not biased. I'm very perceptive. But yeah. And it will be really interesting also to see how like doing a regression online is different than doing it in person. One of the things that I'm looking forward to personally is that there won't be that one person in the room snoring during the regression because it happens at every convention Michelle tries to run past life regression at and you know at the point where I was just taking like video of the regression. If somebody next to me is snoring, like, well, that's a real weird video now. Can't fix that. But this one should be a little more comfortable for everyone because we'll be in your own space and we'll be in our space and we can all make sure that the snoring people or the snoring cats are taken care of.
Well, I always feel bad for like poking somebody if they're snoring because on one hand it is hindering everybody else's experience, but on the other hand I don't want to embarrass someone and it's also perfectly okay to like fall asleep and process stuff. So this is important. If you're the sort who falls asleep when you're listening to certain things, when you're doing meditations, that's not a failure. It may be that it's just easier for you to access that stuff in the dream space with your dreaming mind. And you're going to like take it in a subconscious way, and it's going to eventually like slowly burble up in a way that you can handle. There's nothing wrong with falling asleep while you're doing that work. The only thing that ends up being problematic
is if you fall asleep and make noise.
Yeah, honestly, because then everybody else, different results, different experiences.
Truth.
But don't ever feel bad about that.
And I think, yes, I have left up on screen the link to join Patreon if you want to. There's lots there. We try to give patrons get first access to Kyphi when new batches of Kyphi go up for sale. There's weekly live chats at this point that we do. Goodness.
There's just a hunk of frankincense wood that I kind of want to get out of here. Maybe.
Yeah, it's kind of covered in delicious Kyphi.
Yeah, well, I'm to the point of rolling the Kyphi anyway, I think.
All right.
So,
Kyphi rolling time.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a lot of awesome stuff. I have a feeling that people are in the chat now being like, yeah, patrons.
Yeah, Patreon's been pretty good to me. I've had it long enough that I got haunted. Patreon.com/haunted.
Well, and it's also it's been an incredible help not only to us but also to our community. Like because of the support that Michelle's gotten on Patreon.
That's the thing. It's like
we've been able to help our friend Abri transition out of a job that was killing her. And she now has more time to do her energy body readings and all the other cool stuff she does. And she's helping us like make the Patreon better.
Yeah,
She
so,
does
so the money
incredible
from the
graphic
Patreon
design.
is not
It
going
is-
to like line my pockets or
No,
buy
it's
fancy
literally
fucking
going
cars.
back into doing
Literally,
more cool
it's
stuff.
the, well, here's this student, and I would love to be able to pay them for all the work that they're doing, and now I fucking can.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's
pretty amazing.
you are helping me help other people and
Yeah.
and build community, and I adore that, and I'm so thankful.
You know, in a lot of ways, I feel like you and I operate like a nonprofit. Like we don't really.
Yeah.
Like all the money we get from our businesses just goes back
Trust
into doing
me, in
more
the
fun stuff.
90s when I tried to fucking like register a thing, the state of Ohio was like, that's not a business. You're not trying to actually make money. I'm like, but money is exchanged and you require me to have this paperwork.
Oh no.
Anyway,
I fixed it. Now we have multiple nonprofits and lots of businesses.
Patreon made it easier. Like what are my goals? My goals are to do these things. The money helps me fit the goals and also keeps me in tea.
It's true.
I have
And the tea habit is substantial.
between the tea and Trader Joe's chocolate covered pretzels.
This is true. That is a lot.
Like those are my two luxuries. I think I am to the point of yep, I think we're good. I think we have kefied up here. Which means that so do you want to hold it and I'll try to scrape it out?
Sure. I can hold it. Maybe
Just do not touch any part of that.
Of the copper.
Like actually
Yeah, just pull my sleeves down.
Pull your sleeves down because
Thank
you will burn yourself.
I believe you. Okay, same goes for you though.
Yeah.
Okay. Have an elbow.
Yeah, sorry guys.
The internet. Elbow to the face. Ugh. Wow, this is really hot. I'm
Yeah.
amazed you've survived this long being
I am
close to it.
mostly fireproof, remember?
I do, but like that doesn't mean you're heat proof. You don't like the heat.
Here, put it over there. I can start scraping from over there.
Sounds good.
Oh,
I'll keep holding it for you. How about that?
Sure.
Because I love you very much.
Okay.
Yeah, one of those other scrapers.
Yep. All right, Mama.
Magical.
Cats, Mama, we are making some progress with the things that you
Yeah.
made.
These already are
Yeah.
working a lot better.
Oh, they're fantastic. I
Should we keep the heat on this one so that you can?
yeah, before it
Yeah.
a good idea.
Because then we can leave this.
Down to 1.
It's just it's on the back one.
Oops. Okay, well let me go forward then.
That's not helping. Yeah. That's okay. Should I like roll the kefi out? Or... Oh wow! Look at that scraper.
Yeah, that's
Jeez.
the best thing
These
ever.
tools work, guys. I
Oh,
was not expecting it to just
like peel it right
like
off.
it's clean where the scraper was. I've never seen this pot that clean.
Well, yeah, because like
Well, it's so hard to
actually, yeah.
my own fault for not being able to clean it off, but
No, it's
still,
okay.
this is crazy.
There was one that she made to try to get into those little bits. Let me see. I think
Is
it's
that the one I was looking
this.
for?
No, I think it's this one.
Okay,
Yeah, she made.
because that one was really good at getting into the honey.
Yeah, she made this one to get into the side bits.
Nice.
Like she just gave me a whole complement
So
of
good.
items.
Wow. Watch your knuckles there.
Well, and she has charged me with the give me feedback for what you might need different or added because so here was the thing is since I was having her make me these things and I knew that she loves woodworking, olive wood is difficult to get a hold of and it's pretty expensive. So I bought her enough olive wood to make me things and then I sent her like twice that so that she could make her own things and she could make a couple of bowls and just like really indulge her creativity. And at first she's like, how many spoons do you want? I'm like 3 maybe? She's like, you sent me a lot. Do you realize how much you sent me? I'm like, yes, absolutely. And I'd like you to have stuff for you.
Community.
Oh my goodness.
Can I have the flat scraper? I think I can get a good angle.
Sure.
On some of these.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna move this to absolute low. If you want to scrape, I'm gonna roll over here a little bit.
Yeah. Oh yeah. This is good.
Yeah, you. Oh.
Hot but good.
Okay.
Hot yoga.
Oh, all right. Yeah, sorry, we won't be answering any questions while we try to wrangle this stuff. 'Cause there's one thing about it, like it will start to cool pretty quickly, and we don't want to waste anything. Like it's every little bit counts. No, do not use your hands.
No, do not. You know what happens. You okay?
Yeah, no, I was checking this because. All right. Oh, just not sure that that's great.
The rolling pin.
Yeah. Yeah, it's mostly just getting a lot of stuff on the rolling pin.
Okay. Well, let's switch back to not using that then.
Oh my lord. Oh, yeah, that was a bad idea.
I was wondering if you were going to use like benzoin to make sure it didn't stick to the rolling pin.
No. Well, so the idea was that it's stone and it won't stick. No, it's. I now just have a rolling pin that is completely covered in kefi.
Oh dear.
I'm not even sure what I'm doing with that. All right.
I can clean it up.
Yeah.
I got razor blades.
I'm
I
just
can do
using-
anything.
Just using my hands. Actually, maybe just use these things. All right. Yeah, that's probably a better idea. Because I have to spread it out so it cools and cures.
Okay. I think that's the last of it pretty much.
Just
Oh wow.
that was a terrible
Oops.
idea.
Okay, I'm turning the stove off.
Okay, this looks like less than the last batch.
Yeah,
Hard to
it's-
tell.
It's not very spread out yet.
Yeah, no, hard to tell.
And it's still quite thick.
Well, I did boil it down more,
Hmm.
and we will see.
Yeah. More of it went up in smoke, literally. Or steam.
Well, the instructions in the original stuff is like really weird because it's like, boil till like, it's reduced 1/10 of its liquid. Like, they're weird instructions. I know you guys can't see us actually like working on the kefi. I apologize.
Actually, I could fix that. I've got a computer right next to you.
Or I could move this thing
Just keep that.
a little bit so it's not just like up our noses.
Just keep doing your thing. It's okay.
Okay.
I have a plan.
Okay.
There we go. Okay. Yeah. Now we can see everything.
Oh, this little scraper is the best thing ever. Holy crap.
Yeah, it is.
I would not have thought to ask for this either. Like, that was all Mrs. Mason.
Okay. Do you want to check the pot and see if that's sufficiently scraping? Oh dear.
I mean, oh yeah, I couldn't do any better than that. That's great.
Woohoo. Here, I'll scrape it.
Yeah, please fix that. That. All right.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and it's sticking on it on a way that I'm like, it shouldn't be, but okay. That's supposed to do the same thing that this does, where the stuff gets cold. I don't know. That was a terrible idea.
Well, live and learn. We have learned something.
Yeah.
That is for sure.
So much for that little bugger. It seemed like a good idea at the time.
Where have I heard that before? This isn't too bad.
Good. For those of you who might be turning in now, what are we doing here? This
What
is,
in
in
the
fact,
world?
not a brownie. It's not hash. It is kefi. We are trying to flatten it out so it will cool and cure. And it was just recently molten, and I probably shouldn't have this much of it on my fingers, but it's a good thing I'm mostly fireproof.
Is it still hot?
Yeah, oh yeah, very hot.
Oh, yeah, it is. Toasty batter.
I am
Batter up.
very covered with kiwi.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, no, it smells like kefi now, but different. Like noticeably similar but different.
Every batch is a little different.
Yep.
I've just decided to embrace the fact that I will not be able to like make the same batch twice.
Well, I like that. I mean, it makes sense given that it's you that you're turning it into magic, not
Well,
just
also,
trying to do the same thing. Over.
so
Oh,
so
no.
this thing, the kefi is so much about the different subtleties of each of the ingredients that where the ingredient comes from is important. And it's also why I started calling it vintage, because the reason that a vintage of wine tastes different and cures differently is a whole number of different variables, not only the grapes, but the way the season was, how much sun was there, how hot was it, how much water. No year is going to be the same.
Almost like they grow up in the real world.
Yeah, and in this case, you've got those variables for every one of these things. Like, I used two different types of frankincense, Boswellia serrata and the mahogany gold. And Boswellia serrata had a very sweet taste or scent to it. The mahogany gold has a little bit more of like the sort of piney, resiny frankincense scent. And then I used a type of myrrh. I didn't use Arabian myrrh because Wild Tree Essentials, I ordered it and I think like I must have been like, I got it in my bag, but between the bag and ordering, like somebody else had checked out and was gone because they were just clearing out all of their stuff. So I didn't get the Arabian myrrh. I got instead something called kua, which let me look up their details. The kua is Commiphora kua myrrh from the island of Socotra. So it was rare sourced, an unusual location, and like I'm all about like where did it come from? And how is that going to be different? And like the Boswellia serrata is called Indian myrrh, or sorry, Indian frankincense, and it's one of the frankincenses that is used more extensively in medical stuff. And so I wanted that healing and some of the, so anyway.
That's what it fit.
I also wanted cinnamon to be one of the stronger notes. And the way you usually make this, like the frankincense and myrrh, like those are the strongest once it's all done. And I'm hoping that you're going to have the frankincense and myrrh, but with a strong middle note of cinnamon.
It's a good thing you're a super taster to keep track of all these.
And it's a good thing that that translates to my nose as well. Yeah, this is definitely, this has rolled out to be less than the other ones, but that is okay. And I love this like fucking hunk of, wood from a frankincense tree. Just whole thing right there. There's a couple of little places where it's like, you know, there's a chunk of stuff from the myrrh trees, and I will say I prefer working with galangal over the cyperus grass rhizomes because those things are so hard. It's impossible to try to grind them down.
Yeah, that was a pain to try to do that.
No, it's also when I'm going to look into tiger nut flour. So the people who do paleo Tiger nuts are actually a food. I wouldn't have found tiger nuts except I found a recipe in an old Egyptian papyrus for a sweet that's just ground tiger nuts and honey. Yeah. And you make these little pyramid-shaped loaves out of it. And then I was like, tiger nuts, and somebody else was translating cyperus nut or cyperus root as tiger nut, and they're not exactly the same. Like they're in the same way that cassia and true cinnamon are from the same broad group of trees, but like one. So same thing with tiger nut and cyperus grass. Anyway, tiger nut is like maybe $10 a pound for a pound of flour, pre-ground. Pre-ground is the important part. I don't have to ground those bitches.
Phoenix. Cool.
Yeah.
Your hands smell good?
I'm pretty sure. I'm gonna need to like slowly get the bits off of my hand.
Mm-hmm. I can smell them before you do.
I mean, they're gonna smell like this all night.
I know. I'm excited. I think that's the thing that makes me most excited for wearable kefi. Is just the way that it smells when it's combined with person smell.
Yeah.
Is even better than the way it smells when it's just being itself.
Oh, the only thing that was hanging me up was the mastic.
Yeah. Cool. All right.
Yep.
I think we have come to the end of our live stream for the night.
We're
this
good.
kefi is ready to start curing.
Yep. We have a whole room at this point that is kept away from the cats, so we can just lay kefi out and let it just.
All the surfaces.
Yep, every surface is full of kefi at
Except
this point.
for the bed.
Well,
Not
yeah,
the bed
not the bed yet. Yet is the outcome. Well, I mean, we're almost to the point with the lunar eclipse. Like we want to sit down and like just do a bunch of kefi rolling. We can get it all packaged up.
Yeah, we can. Eventually.
It's not a simple hobby.
No, that would be gaming in theory.
I mean, gaming's expensive too,
but it is simple.
I mean, at least this makes cool stuff that I can share with people.
Yeah.
Gaming does too, but
this is true. All right. Thank you all for being here with us throughout this long process.
Company
and keeping me sane
through the Kyphi Boil.
Or did you? All right. Good night, everybody.